great action here. Some of the world's best sailors on board. Top performing boat. Look at that, France 81, the big foil. Whoa, the boat flying out of the water.
Welcome back to the Weymouth and Portland National Sailing Academy and the final moments that we've been waiting for, the medal racing of the 2019 Volvo European Championships. I'm Jenny Tulloch, joined by double Olympic medalist Hannah Mills and yachting journalist Andy Rice, and we have had a fantastic week of racing so far, you guys, and now really exciting medal racing coming up.
So many good scenarios to follow, and I mean, we'll come on to the NACRAs later, the 49ers later. But the first one coming up, the 49erFX, the gold medal, not much in contention, but the silver and bronze, there's an awful lot going on there. 6 boats in serious contention for those 2 medals.
And in many ways, Hannah, it is a big story and a big, big fight for second place. But most importantly, that fight relies on Netherlands 1, and they've got the 1 because they won the World Championship last year. But what's the big fight for them today?
Well, the big fight for these girls is the sort of ultimate goal for any team in this Olympic cycle, and that's to qualify themselves for Tokyo 2020, the Olympic Games held next year. And it's a big fight on their hands. They're currently in second, and to get that spot, it's a combination of 2 events that have happened previously, and this being the second one, and we know now that they need to come third or better. So they're in second, but as we've said, it's a really close fight behind them, so it's going to be nail-biting stuff for those girls.
It's going to be nail-biting for them, and I think nail-biting ashore for the second Netherlands team, the one who didn't quite make the medal race, but they had won the previous event, the first of the qualifier. You were speaking with the father of one of those teammates earlier, Andy?
Yes, the father of the skipper, 21-year-old Odile Van Aanholt. And he was saying, well, that it's totally out of our control. All we can do is watch, but she's been in this situation before. She's won regattas, she's missed out on regattas, and she's got a long career ahead of her. But he also said for Marika Jongens, age 32, this is her last shot. So this is last chance saloon for Marika in the front of that FX, which won't be on the water today, but he said she won't even be watching. It's just the emotions are running so high for those sailors not even going sailing, because their fate is out of their hands. It's all within the grasp of the reigning world champions Annemiek Beckering and Annette Dutz, either to stay in the top 3, get the slot to Tokyo 2020, or if they miss out, it's going to be really disappointing for them. So either way, when that Dutch boat crosses the finish line, I think we're going to see emotions of one kind or another. We're going to have to work out whether it's tears of joy or tears of sorrow.
We're going to have to work out some math, I'm sure, if the racing's as close as we're expecting to see. But we can tell you a little bit about the score line as it stands. We said the Brazilians quite far ahead on 56 points. They've almost got it nailed. Sorry, 56 was the earlier scoreline, but they've almost got it nailed and almost have the race in the bag with a 19-point lead over the second place. And then that's where it gets really tight and the battle gets really, really heated up. And behind this second place is the young Swedish team we've been speaking about a lot this week, and they've just really proven that they're shining stars.
Yeah, I think no matter how they do today, they're going to come away from this week really, really positive. They've performed at the start of the week when it was windy, wavy, really tough physical conditions, and they're maybe less favoured, as they would say, conditions towards the end of the week. The wind's been a lot lighter, and they've still performed. So I think they're showing really good promise and starting to peak maybe at the right time in the cycle for that Olympic selection spot.
And yet they're tied, Andy, with the fourth place, the Norwegians, Helen Naas and Marie Ronningen. So a really close battle for those top 3 spots.
Yes, and the Norwegians have the advantage. They already won the European Championships last year. They have that experience. They know what it's like to win at this level. But I don't see much fear from Bobek and Tankstrom. I do think they're surprising themselves this week, but they're getting very comfortable with their new world-class status. And when you think, you go back to 5th place, and that's Maloney and Meach from New Zealand, so close to winning the gold medal in Rio 2016, came away with the Olympic silver medal, one of the dominant teams since the beginning of the 49erFX class just 5 or 6 years ago. So for those young Swedes to be ahead of class like that is really impressive.
I mean, I guess we could analyze that a little bit. Hannah, what's maybe been the failure for Alex and Molly this week? We would expect them typically to be in the medal positions, and sitting 5th, they are very close still, just 84 points behind the 81-point tie for 3rd. But where do you think they've maybe gone wrong a little bit?
It's hard for me to say. We can kind of only speculate sat here in the commentators' booth, but I think this is a European Championships, and for all the European teams, for sure, it's a big pull and a big maybe part of their selection trials for Tokyo. It's a very important event, and potentially being from New Zealand, there's not as much waiting on this event for them, and maybe just mindset-wise, they're not quite in the same place as they would be if it was a World Championships or the Olympic Games.
It's a valid point. I think yesterday you were talking about we're now seeing the New Zealand boat who we were speaking with and speaking about, and Netherlands won there, and you can actually see a really dark cloud line behind them out there, Hannah. Maybe finally not going to be the sunny Weymouth we've seen this morning.
Yeah, that dark cloud's been looming for about an hour or so now, and we're just really hoping it stays over there, because I think if it moves onto the racecourse, it could have quite a big impact on the wind. But currently it's been sitting pretty steady for the last hour over the far side of the race course, so yeah, hopefully won't come into play. But we've got a sort of vaguely solid southwesterly breeze, similar to what we had this morning for the 49er men for their final fleet race, but a little bit more breeze, which is nice to see, maybe up at sort of 5 or 6 knots.
At least enough to get them on the trapeze, as we saw the Brazilians just about 10 or 20 seconds ago, just testing the line out on Port Tack, and both of them on the trapeze, which was more than we could say for the final 49er gold medal, the gold fleet race this morning. That was still an intriguing race, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was such an intriguing race. I think mainly from our perspective, results-wise, it's really shaken things up at the top of the standings, and given Dylan Fletcher and Stuart Bithell at GBR6 a real shot at attacking the Olympic champions Peter Burling and Blair Tuke going into the medal race. But that'll be later on. I think we're in the 5 minutes for this 49erFX medal race. Yeah, it's shaping up to be a really tough battle.
This is a really short line, isn't it? It's so much shorter now that we've reduced the fleet down from 25 or so down to the final 10, and there's not a lot of room on that line. No chance of a Port Tack start, I wouldn't have thought.
Well, it's interesting. We're seeing the Brazilians see what that Port Tack angle looks like, so they're at least kind of debating, where are we going to go? What do we want to do for this race? And I guess, Hannah, you're the one who knows these waters the best. What do you think is the right situation for this medal race, knowing the southwesterly and what the race course looks like out there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen exactly where they've put the race course in Portland Harbour, but the southwesterly, I think, as long as it's sort of left of 230 wind angle, then the left is often strong at the top, like we've been speaking about. And it's maybe close to that 230, looking at the angles of the boats on starboard there. So maybe it's going to be slightly more of an open track than we've seen. But in the medal race, with the shorter line, with the less boats on the race course, there's a lot less risk starting to an end, because the race course is smaller and the fleet's smaller. So often we see the starboard end or the port end. Whoever wins one of those will generally come out ahead, just given the nature of the short course racing.
You can see it actually looks like the Brazilians not quite fighting for their typical further up the line spot. We've seen them really be happy parked at the boat end a lot of this week, Andy. We saw them win the boat a number of times early in the week, and to see them kind of down here with Netherlands one, with the 2 Swedish boats, I think yeah, we saw them on Port Tack, but I think maybe we're gonna see them liking the left.
Yeah, well, I think the Brazilians, just when we spoke to them just now when we went for our walk in the park, I think they know that there's a lot riding on this race for other people. They've really just got to sail around the track and keep their nose clean. They don't want to intervene on the bigger battle, which we're going to be watching, this battle for silver and bronze, and they'll be aware of the Dutch selection trial that we've been talking about. So I think the Brazilians will want to be respectful of the other teams out there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I really like watching Netherlands 1 now positioning here. You know, they know how much is riding on this race, and they're putting themselves in a pretty strong position to fight for that pin end and at least give themselves a real opportunity in this race, knowing that there is sort of 4 or 5 boats really close behind them on points, so they can't really control all those boats at one time, so they've just got to sail their race, and that looks like a nice spot to try and do that from.
Doing it so early, aren't they? I mean, 2 minutes 15 to go, and they're already on the line. And I don't think you can underestimate the level of control that is applied to seemingly doing nothing, because there's a lot of backward paddling going on there, and you've got to do it without breaking the rules as well.
I think impressively, you can see how much better, perhaps, Netherlands 1 is at doing that than Sweden 22. So we've spoken a lot about this young team. They're sitting in 3rd overall going into this medal race. But look at how Brazil, how Ned 1, even how the US boats and the rest of the fleet above them have been able to really hold their spot. And yet the young Swedes, they don't quite seem to have it nailed yet. The ability, Hannah spoke about it earlier, to use the to use the fully battened mains to full control and to stay on a line like this. And I think we were just seeing maybe just a tiny bit less training time on the Swedish boat. They've decided, and it looks like perhaps they've decided on purpose that actually they want to move up the line. So then to back out and to go up further up the fleet maybe is where they want the boat instead. Yeah,
I mean, they either got in a tough spot there just above the Dutch team and felt they're never going to hold their lane off that start line, or they had the capabilities to get their eyes out and realise maybe there's a right shift, maybe a bit more pressure coming down the right hand side, and actually they want to reposition themselves. So from where we're sat, we can't really tell, but I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they've spotted something we can't see.
Well, we know the battle is on down the fleet all the way from 2nd to 6th place. Anyone there could medal, and I think we're looking at Norway as the boat who is the furthest and closest to the committee boat in the into the line, or Denmark 7, and they are both very much in that contention spot. So it's going to be really impressive 30 seconds from now to see who's actually picked it right, whether it's the left is going to pay, whether the right's going to pay. I think we know Dylan Fletcher is watching online, so he's probably got an eye to this race to figure out what's going to pay for the men as they're racing later on. I'm sure some of the NACRA sailors, as well as getting their boats rigged and ready to go, are probably tuning into this 15 seconds to go, 10 seconds to go to the start. It's all about execution now. They've held their line. Who can accelerate the best? With 5 seconds now, I think it's going to be perhaps Netherlands 1, but let's take a look. Sweden as well, having a really good start here, Hannah.
They looked pretty close to me on the line. We lost the countdown at the end there, but I think if there is an individual recall, which I can't quite see, maybe it's all clear. Yeah, great start by Sweden if that was all clear in the middle of the line. Fantastic execution, but that's actually the boat in 8th place currently, so not quite in the battle for the medals.
I think impressively Brazil and Netherlands 1, they just need to stay in touch here. Brazil needs to make sure that Netherlands 1 doesn't necessarily run away with it, but really Brazil almost can't lose this, as we've said. So for them to be following out to the left here, it's a game of control, and who's got the control up the pack, who's able to choose and decide when to tack, and who do you guys think is actually the most in control at the moment?
It's a tough call. I think Netherlands 1 got a great start off the pin end. They're leading out to the left, potentially the favoured side of the course in this wind conditioning in Portland Harbour. They haven't got control right now over when they can tack, but I know they'll be pushing high, trying to squeeze out the Brazilian boat above them, trying to squeeze out the Swedish boat above them, so that then they can make the decision on when they want to tack. But right now they'll feel pretty happy. The whole fleet's pretty much coming with them out to the left, so ultimately, right as now as it stands, they're going to be in the game at the windward mark, and that's all they need to do is just be in the race at the first windward mark.
So we got Norway on the far left of our screen. We got the Netherlands controlling the right. Hannah, who would you rather be right now?
For sure, I'd rather be the Netherlands girls. You know, they can sail exactly the angle they want to. They're not being affected by any other boats in terms of getting their boat speed driving as fast as possible. And they look like they're just extending the whole time. So maybe a little bit of a left shift or a bit more pressure on that left-hand side. The right boats look a little bit softer. And I'm sure that the crews on those boats will be talking all the time about how the other boats look, whether they're in more breeze, what angle they're pointing at. The communication on these boats is so important, and it's especially in this light stuff, it'll be fairly continuous.
At least there's a decent bit of breeze. You look on the boats on the far side and we're seeing more trapezing going on than we did with the bigger rigs of the men's 49er early on today, but that rain cloud's still looming in the background. It's been hanging there an awful long time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think what's nice for the Dutch boat right now is looking onto the right-hand side of the course. It's just the two Danish boats heading out that way, and although one of them, I think Denmark 7, slightly in contention to knock them off their second spot, they're still a fair way back, and actually their closest rivals are pretty much heading their way behind them almost, so they're in a really commanding position right now.
I think it is going to be a good reminder that Denmark 7, the boat who was clearly forced to tack out there, they had bad positioning, but they had almost the best day yesterday. They had a 4 and a 1, and everyone else was so up and down throughout the day that they seemed to have something going well in the light air. They seemed to have good speed. Now the rest of the fleet also tacking onto port is going to allow us to really see which side is paid. But I think you're right, Netherlands won in such strong positioning here, and those girls had everything to prove. They have everything riding on this race, and they're showing right now they're strong as nails mentally, at least.
Absolutely. I mean, they nailed the start that they wanted, and so far, if they stay where they are, then we will have seen the Brits winning the pin earlier on in the race this morning, and again winning the pin here. Our Netherlands won, so that does seem to be a key position on the start line. And just as you said, Hannah, it seems like the left, with the wind from this angle and the land effect from 500 feet high of Portland nearby, it does seem like the left is the better bet most of the time.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think we're seeing this time and time again now, and all the next fleets, you know, the 49ers and the NACRAs coming on next, will be watching this race, I'm sure, and I think we might see a much more hard-fought battle for that pin end if the left comes in here, which it looks from our angle as if it might be. The Netherlands won there in such a controlling position. They've got the whole fleet to leeward of them. There's a couple of boats with a bit of leverage, but they'll be communicating now that they can see the New Zealand boat, New Zealand 8, crossing the Danish, who are on the right-hand side. So they'll know they're in pretty good shape up on this left-hand side, and they'll be gaining confidence more and more that they've got the winning strategy up this first beat.
I think position-wise as well, in that battle for second, third, fourth, and fifth, the fact that we're seeing Norway 26 here, and we haven't really seen, we saw Denmark 7 heading out to the left, but you can see them coming back now. They're going to cross behind Norway 26. We haven't necessarily seen Sweden 22 until just now. They're coming at us on starboard, but it looks like maybe that rejig up to the committee boat into the line wasn't the best spot. So right now, I think Norway 26, they were currently tied with the Swedes, so if they beat them overall in this race, they're winning at least that last medal spot. So keeping an eye on Norway, who's now hiding behind Netherlands 1, and knowing that those girls, they've had a good week in general. They had maybe a tougher day yesterday, but they have been sailing well and in contention, especially with some of the teams having really deep scores yesterday. They were able to rise to the top, and we should see them probably at some point maybe keep an eye on the Swedes behind them and try to make sure they're ensuring that third place.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we always look at the medal race as the first lap. You're trying to execute your game plan, particularly if there's a lot of people in the mix for the medals, and then it's really at the bottom of that first run that you reassess what's going on and decide exactly what it is you need to do around the next lap of the course. So I think Norway will probably sail a bit more of their own strategy and their own race this first lap, and then we might see a bit more defensive manoeuvre up the second lap.
And I liked as well, we talked to the British team just before they went out, Charlotte Dobson and Saskia Tidy, and Charlotte was pretty upbeat. She said, we can't go downhill from here, we can only go up. They were right, they have more than 20 points to 8th place behind them, but they have less than 20. They have 10 points to 6th, and then even just close to 5th as well. So they were pretty fired up, and it looks like decent positioning here for them at the moment. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they're doing pretty well there. They're not quite on the front pack, but they're just in the race, you know, and that's what you have to do, is you have to stay in the race for this medal race. And the Dutch have done a fantastic job. You know, they've absolutely executed their plan, and they've really dominated this first up win leg. I don't feel like I'd ever have been particularly nervous as that Dutch boat, which is really nice. You know, you just want to feel in control and not that you're sort of waiting for other people to make a mistake. It's all within your control.
Well, they've controlled this beautifully. A perfect ley line call there for Netherlands 1, and an excellent start to the medal race, taking that top mark, taking the lead in the race, and knowing what they have to do to get their Olympic contention. They're doing everything that they can so far. Behind them, the Brazilians, who've done almost everything necessary going into this moment to be able to execute, and wearing the yellow jerseys for a reason, showing that they're good in this second place. But here is where the battle really lies, and GBR managing to get around into third. So moving forward through the pack as much as they need to, as much as they can, and the Norwegians rolling around the outside, rolling them on Sweden 15. I think Sweden 15 here going to have to turn a penalty.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'll see how that goes. I think they were on starboard before 3 boat lengths, so they had the rights to luff the Norwegian boat, and I think actually everyone seems to be pretty happy with that, and they've all hoisted their kites downwind. But really tight packed sort of second half of this fleet, and a lot of opportunities here for sort of third, fourth and fifth position overall to try and get into the medals.
Back with the leaders, and there's a bit of bounce through the chop of Portland Harbour, maybe a bit of powerboat wake or something like that. You've got to try and keep those sails as steady, maybe steer up a little bit higher than normal, just to keep the power running through the rig when you're going through that chop. The Dutch will be hoping that whatever they're having to bounce their way through, the other boats behind them will also have to do.
Yeah, this sort of situation is pretty stressful in this light winds when you've got that rib chop. I mean, you know full well that everyone else is going through it, but it doesn't stop the heart rate rising and the frustration just taking hold a little bit as you feel your boat slow down. So yeah, I feel for those guys watching them sail through that. It's not a nice feeling, but they are leading the race, and they're so far doing everything they need to do to ensure themselves to hold on to that silver medal, but more crucially hold on to their Olympic Tokyo 2020 spot. So yeah, looking really good for these girls right now.
And if the Dutch Federation wanted to test the mental fortitude of whichever sailors they send to the Games for Tokyo 2020 next year, then certainly these girls, Netherlands 1, are rising to that challenge. They've risen to the challenge of the pressure that they're under, and doing the very best they can, leading this race, going into their jibe, quick flick of the boom, and then straight out onto the handle just to get the boat flat. Nice bit of balletic athleticism by Annemiek Bekkering.
Yeah, that was a beautifully executed jibe, and you can see in the light air like this, the crew actually starts and finishes the jibe forward of the mast, so stays forward of the jibe all the way through, and it really is up to the skipper to not only execute the flatten, but also make sure to pop all of the mainsail battens on the way across. So you can see that's kind of the first step there. Annemiek was pulling the mainsail across, popping the battens, and then, yeah, as you said, the balletic flatten out on the wire, coming in, clipping in, and then just kind of making sure to end up on the proper angle. And they've done that really, really nicely. That looked like a good job in a jibe. But behind them here, it actually does look like it's closed down just a touch. The guys jibing early. We can see GBR flag, and I think Norway again, but maybe Norway's made a little bit of a move there on GBR. Yeah,
I think that they've done the classic jibe inside manoeuvre, which as the boat in front you're always expecting when you go for that jibe, and they've executed it really nicely. I think they're a little bit separated to windward, so I think GBR 10 will be holding on pretty nicely there, but it's certainly the controlling move by the Norwegians to try and attack the GBR boat just in front of them. But I think ultimately they're not too worried about the British boat. I think for them at the moment it's about beating Sweden 22 to hold or to overtake them and to grab that bronze medal.
Do I see top right of picture just above the rig of Netherlands 1? Is that the purple Jenica of the Brazilians on the far side? Because if it is, then they don't seem like they've sailed a terribly good run here at the moment. But they're a little bit far away to be able to tell on that.
I don't think we've got them on the tracker right now is our biggest problem, but it's, I mean, they had a purple kite, so I think it could well be them, and that might just be them sort of staying out the way a little bit and sort of just sailing their own race, having a 19-point lead. You know, they said before the race they don't want to get involved in that battle for second, third medal positions, so that could be why we saw them do that.
And it does look like that is them on the left of picture, just being jibed in front of by the Norwegians. And it's maybe not as bad as I thought, but they certainly have given away some ground when you think that they were still relatively close to the leaders going around the Weymouth mark. So we are seeing some place changing, some opportunities. And the Brazilians now in the middle of the pack, their position there could actually affect the outcome of the other medals, depending on who's in front and who's behind them.
How many places they need between them and the rest. And for Norway right now, Norway's closest competition is the other Swedish boat. So not the boat who's just rounded, but Sweden 22. So I think you're right. They're happy to have Brazil be the buffer. They're happy to have as many points as they can put between themselves and Sweden to ensure that they get that third place, at least, with Netherlands sort of running away with at least the silver medal with the first place in this race overall. Now, that's Sweden 22 rounding the right-hand mark. So I think, surprisingly, they're rounding the same side as Norway, which for Norway makes them feel really comfortable, right, Hannah?
Yeah, super comfortable. I think that gate, the two marks there on the screen, the gate marks, they're actually pretty far apart. So there is big opportunities if you pick the wrong one to make a big gain or a big loss. So for the Norwegians to see the Swedish follow them round, it's a huge relief, because suddenly they're well back in control of their race and their outcome. And their other threat, the Kiwi boat, went round the other mark, but they've pretty quickly tacked. So they're also sort of following the Norwegians' line. So they'll know exactly now where those two boats are, and I'm sure we'll see them just put themselves between those boats and the next mark, just to consolidate their jump up the leaderboard into third.
So that was a very solid run by the Norwegians on the right of screen there. They managed to get past the Brits, they managed to get past the Brazilians, and so the reigning European champions putting on a really strong showing in this race right now. Not going to be enough to hold on to their title, but maybe enough to win another medal.
Yeah, it's great to see that they're really showing what previous European champions can do, and that's what it's about in the medal race, is really coming out and showing what you're made of, because it is high pressure, it is double points, so there's a lot to gain and there's a lot to lose, and when there's so many of you fighting for the medals, it's really stressful.
And it looks like they've got a fairly good line on the right-hand side. The Norwegians look, I think they're maybe the green boat on our tracer there, and a little bit higher than Netherlands leading this race at the moment. Whether that will hold, or maybe they'll start to cave in towards the Netherlands line, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and the Netherlands boat will be looking at the Norwegians line and seeing how many boats are now starting to get to the right of them. I think their three closest boats, the Norwegians, the Sweden 22 and New Zealand 8, are now getting to the right of them. So I'm sure they'll be aware of that and looking to maybe think about attack back and to start to cover those boats out on that side, because ultimately it's about who can beat you, and you need to know where they are on the race course.
If they carry on a little bit longer, it doesn't leave much room for the Swedish boat on the far left-hand side to go, so that would square them the threat away on that side of the course, and then the biggest threat that they would need to square away would be the Norwegians chasing them on the right-hand side of the course.
Absolutely, but I think looking at the points, the Norwegians need to put at least a boat in between them to overtake them, so they may be happy if the Norwegians overtake them, because they can still afford to just be in second place and still stick in that silver medal position.
So there we go with a maneuver again, and beautiful athleticism again on Netherlands 1. Always such light air that the crew's constantly forward of the mast. Makes it quite difficult actually for the crew to take the main sheet through the tack there. You saw she had to do about 4 different handoffs of her hands and the main sheet around first the mast itself, but also then outside the different sets of shrouds as she comes out to the side of what we call the triangle here. And then of course for the skipper to do a lot of the flattening with their body weight all the way out on the edge of the wire. And I think they've still got a decent, this is just the camera foreshortening, making Sweden 22 looking like they're a lot closer than they actually are. I think they've still got a really decent lead here, but beautifully executed maneuver again here, and they look really under control. They look, maybe they are not as much in the lead as we thought they were there. Norway 26 being able to plant what might be a sticking tack, but really difficult to get these boats up to speed afterwards. So I think Netherlands 1 possibly crawling back through here, Emma.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a mistake from the Dutch girls there. You know, as we just said, like 3 of their closest rivals had split from them to the right a little bit, had got that leverage, and we've just seen it really pay off for the Norwegian team there. They've leapfrogged themselves, I think, into the lead coming up to this windward mark, and it's really closed up with the Kiwi team, as we can see they're coming in on starboard. I'm not not sure whether the Dutch are ahead or not, so that's going to be a really close cross. They've just looked like they've tacked in front of the New Zealand team, so they've just held on to second place, but it's all on now for the Dutch team. It's really closed up, and it's going to be a pretty stressful final run for them.
So you feel that they should have defended the right-hand side a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think you have to choose who's relevant and who's irrelevant in the medal race to your final position, and as we said, the 3 boats that were relevant had split slightly right from them, and yeah, hopefully for those girls that they won't live to regret that decision, but they're still in this race, they're still in second, they're still doing what they need to do. It's clearly been a right shift because they've all 3 first boats have jibe set, so it looks like it might not be too difficult a run, because if it's been a right shift and they've all jibe set, it's probably going to be long port downwind, so maybe not so many overtaking lanes for the boats behind. We'll have to just follow it closely and see.
And it looks like Denmark 7 wanting to jibe set there, but the Brazilians coming upwind just sort of slid them back into change your mind, and I think that's actually quite a good gain for Denmark 7. We saw them much further down the pack earlier on, so they saw that right early and it worked out to their advantage, whereas it's a huge loss for Brazil right now. They're going from what was second place at the top mark to, I think, last at the moment.
I wonder just how hard they're trying. Maybe they're just not pushing any situations. But yeah, they started the race really well. I thought they did really well to hang on to second place all the way up that beat, sitting in the bad air of Netherlands 1 for quite a long time. But we don't really know what's going through the minds of the Brazilians, other than they're pretty comfortable with that gold medal.
Absolutely, and we've got the first 3 here coming downwind on port tack. And we've got Norwegian leading with the Netherlands 1 just behind, and if it stays as it is, Netherlands 1 will hold on to the silver medal. I think they can afford to lose 1 more place on the Norwegian team and still hold that medal, but they'll be looking behind them now at that Kiwi team, and they'll be trying to sail as low an angle as they possibly can, so that when they go for their jibe into the finish or above the finish lay line, the Kiwi team will struggle to jibe on them and take their win. So for them, it's about pushing low now, trying to get a clear lane to jibe in, and to try and keep their race not too stressful.
And will Denmark 7 be able to have any effect on the outcome of that? It is a big shift that they've had down this run, so there's not, I think probably Denmark 7 is already on the lay line for the finish, so there's probably not enough runway on the other jibe to really for them to be able to affect things. So as you were just saying, Hannah, maybe the biggest threat is New Zealand behind the Dutch girls.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they can't control Denmark 7 right now. They've split away, and they're kind of irrelevant because the Dutch boats still just have to finish in the top 3 to hang on to that silver medal, and if they stay ahead of the New Zealand boat and the Swedish yellow kite behind them, then they've done enough. But there is maybe a little threat coming through the middle of the course. Blue kite, Sweden, I think Sweden, can't quite see, Sweden 15. So if they start to come into the mix a little bit, then that could change things up. So it's going to be really interesting to see their angle out of this jibe.
So that jibe there was crucial for Netherlands 1, and the fact that the Kiwis did not go on them, did not simultaneously jibe behind them, I think they almost just let them go there, because now they'll have clear breeze in front. It's the final question here is whether Sweden 15 is able to affect, and it looks like they're a bit too far away to affect. And if this is the final jibe into the ley line, this might be a breather for Netherlands 1 to be able to get through. It looks like Norway might have 1 more jibe to go. They might still be able to take this win, but they probably not quite. We know how short the starting line was. They're probably not quite going to be able to lay on this jibe, which actually means Netherlands 1 still has the opportunity, perhaps, to get in for the win. And I think realistically, as we've said, they've still got the silver medal in the bag. They might even still have this race win. Unfortunately for the nail biters on shore, I think this is going to be Netherlands 1 if they don't capsize there. Jibing into I'd love to see a wider shot to see if they've just won that, and I think perhaps they've actually just won it and taken it from Norway again, and maybe New Zealand sneaking in there as well. But huge relief, I'm sure, for Netherlands 1. I mean, we would love to be on board a camera seeing the faces as they know that they have solidified their Olympic spot.
Well, that was a big hug we saw from the two of them. The hug came first, getting the Jenica down came second, but that was quite a courageous last jibe, wasn't it? They put a lot of roll into that jibe, and as you said, they just had to put a lot of effort into stop the capsize. They really launched the boat across the finish line.
They did. I think what an amazing race by those girls. You know, they executed the first lap, they got put under some pressure up the second lap, and they still managed to hang on and take this, we think second place in the race, but second overall, and win their Olympic trials. I mean, what a way to do it.
That was incredible racing for both of the front two boats there. I do think just out of shot, the Norwegians were able to squeak across the line and into the win, and I think that was a very well sailed race for them to then allow them into the medal. So the Norwegians winning that race means they've moved ahead of Sweden 22 onto the bronze medal spot. Annemiek Beckering and Annette Dutz getting second place there, allowing them not only a silver medal here, but an Olympic spot for Netherlands in Tokyo 2020. And that is the only country that had the Olympic spot riding here, and you can see them holding their flag there and speaking to their coach, and just, I'm sure it's a huge relief.
It would be such a relief. You know, it even makes me emotional, you know, looking at them, and I know what pressure and stress they'll have been under going into that race and this whole week, and it will set them up for really good stead in the preparations for Tokyo, knowing that they've performed under such high stress and pressure at an Olympic trials. And I think that's what you get from having such a tight Olympic trials. You do get set up well for the Olympic Games, which is like no other event in terms of pressure.
Well, I think you can 100% see how relieved they are at the moment, and yet we know they can perform under pressure. They won the World Championships last year. They've just shown here they've gotten second place on a week when they really needed to, and they are so ecstatic and so well deserved to be flying their flag with pride at the moment, and I'm sure their coach is very happy for them as well.
And you know that coach rather well, don't you, Hannah? You've done a bit of 49erFX sailing with Alan Syme.
I have, yeah. Al was great at teaching me some of the ropes of the FX when I jumped in, and it was fab to be able to sail with him. He sailed with Dylan Fletcher at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, and yeah, as you can see, is now coaching the Dutch FX squad, a very successful Dutch FX squad, which is great to see.
All right, well, that's the Dutch and the silver medal, but there were also the Brazilian gold medalists here, gold medalists in Rio 2016, and ultimately they will probably be the favorites going into Tokyo next year. We didn't really see them execute this race, but as you said, Andy, they didn't need to.
No, so it looks like they did play the game of just staying out the way, not wanting to affect the outcome of some really important battles going on within that medal race. So they did the honourable thing. They win the Open European Championships, but of course the Dutch also, as well as winning their trials, become the de facto European champions as well.
Then, as we said, it was third goes to the Norwegians, Helen, Nassen, Marie Ronigan. Then fourth, I think this is back to the Brazilians here. They were wearing yellow jerseys a second ago. Martine must have just taken hers off because we saw it in the race. Probably she was overheated at the finish line there. I think realistically it was still a hard-fought battle, even though they didn't battle as well as we would like to have seen them. But yeah, this is our gold medalist for this event, and as you said, Open European champions. But because they're from that rest of the world area, they don't get the title of European champions here. That does go to the Netherlands girls. Third place then Helen and Marie from Norway, and then fourth place Alex Maloney and Molly Meach. So they were possibly, from our unofficial scores, able to move up from fifth this morning to fourth, just in front of Sweden, the young Swedes, Sweden 22, Wilma and Malin. But let's have a little second, we spoke about them earlier, but a little second to digest Alex and Molly being off the medal, off the podium, and not quite executing the week that they'd wanted.
Yeah, especially after having a disappointing event in Genoa where they didn't manage to make the medal race, and they looked really down in the mouth the day that they realised that they weren't going to make it into the final 10. So I really think that they were trying hard at this event. They do seem to be a click off the pace of the Brazilians, who they were managing to match so closely in the previous cycle leading into Rio 2016, all the way to the final lap of that race in Rio where they were overtaken for the gold by the Brazilians. So I think there's some work for the Kiwis to do to get back to being truly world class at the level that the Brazilians are, but they have at least made good steps forward since Genoa. I mean, they were easily in the medal race and they only just missed out on the medal. So we're talking about fine margins here. There's no catastrophe.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think worth a shout out. I think we've not got official scores, but I think it looks like Sweden 22, the young team, have maybe scraped the European bronze medal position, which for them is an absolutely phenomenal achievement.
Very good point. I mean, we've loved to talk about them this week, and they've surprised themselves with the rate of progress. I mean, if they carry on improving as fast as they have, they'll be unstoppable by the end of the next regatta. But inevitably, when you're young in the fleet, your learning curve is still very high, but they will have gained an awful lot of confidence. There they go, whizzing past our screen, being towed back in by their coach boat. They'll have gained an awful lot of confidence that they can compete at world-class level in light winds as well as their more favoured strong winds. And their strong wind straight line speed has been really good, but they've also started to nail their manoeuvres. Turning corners is a big challenge, and in fact Annalise Murphy, who won the silver medal in the radial, made the switch to the 49erFX just a few months ago. Really, really fast in a straight line, but she laughs at herself as to how much she's got to do. She says it's almost a handicap having the speed they've got, because they get to the Wimber mark or the Leeward mark and suddenly they're surrounded by boats and they don't know what to do. Sort of a nice problem to have.
Yeah.
But,
well, and it's an interesting, the body type wise, Annalise's team and herself being so tall is very similar to the young Swedes. We had her in the other day, and her torso would have been taller than you in that chair, Andy. She was for a skipper, one of the tallest, if not the tallest in the fleet, aside from Annalise. And we spoke about that with the men's fleet, how Pete and Blair are a little bit different than the rest of the fleet, and how the height at certain times on the skipper might be an advantage, especially in breeze. So for Vilma, they had said what we're working on is light air. We've got speed and breeze. We need to make sure that we can execute in light air, and execute they did yesterday with 2/3 when we were watching, and really didn't seem to be struggling in speed there at all.
Absolutely not. I think there's so many positives for that young Swedish team to take from this week. The challenge for them will be doing it again and again and again, and that's always the challenge in sailing. Is once you've broken through and you've got your big break and you feel like you've got a lot of momentum, is okay, what's next? How do I stay there? How do I get better? How do I be a consistent medalist on the podium? And that's what they're going to have to start looking at, hopefully.
Hannah, sorry, just one quick question following on from that. What have you enjoyed more, the climbing the learning curve and seeing that progression, or when you get to the top and the target's on your back, doing what it takes to find those new small margins that's going to keep you at the front of the game? Yeah,
they're just very different journeys for sure, and the sort of the young into it and learning curve really steep every time you go out sailing is so motivating and so exciting to be involved with. And then once you've broken through and you are consistently on the podium, it's okay, well, how do we stay here? And that's harder, I think, is those smaller things and getting your motivation from the smaller things. And to me, it then all becomes, for me personally, a lot about mindset and getting my mindset right and my team's mindset right to keep performing day in, day out.
I thought it was interesting as well yesterday when you said different people are energized by different things. We spoke about that for Ben Saxton and Nicola, who are coming up. We were just seeing the NACRAs getting out to the race course. They will be racing next in the medal races, and Ben is one of those who gets energized by racing all kinds of different fleets here on the weekends in the UK, elsewhere around the world. He just likes taking that back into the NACRA.
He does. Ben sails so many different classes and does exceptionally well in pretty much anything he steps into. It's amazing to watch. He's a very talented sailor, and he's sailing with Nicola Boniface, who's an incredible NACRA crew. She's sailed catamarans her whole life pretty much, so she's very experienced in this type of sailing and this type of boat. And they've teamed up about a year ago actually, and they've made real progress, and they're constantly pushing for that top spot and constantly pushing for podium positions. So this race is going to be a real test for them. They've got the other British team, John Gimpson and Anna Burnett, hot on their heels, but as we said earlier, it's a big battle for that podium within the top 6 NACRA teams.
Well, and I think yesterday they put themselves as much as they could into the battle. They had the best day by miles in the NACRA fleet with a 2-1-2. Everyone else, as we said, was so up and down, the leaders deep and scoring deep scores, and all of a sudden Ben and Nicola just went out and crushed it. And I think realistically today's breeze not that different from yesterday, so they must be feeling strong, feeling confident going into this race.
Yeah, you would think so, and I think Ben Saxton will have seen what the winning moves were in the 2 races we've seen so far today. And I suppose, Hannah, do you think that the same tactics apply to twin-hull boats like the NACRA as we've seen with the monohulls? Is the pin end potentially going to be as much of a winner in a multi-hull as it would be in a monohull?
Yes, good question, and probably not one for me, but I'll give it a go. I think starting on the edges, as we've seen when it's this light, is really powerful manoeuvre. With the NACRA, I don't know if it's harder to pinch people out with the double hull. And so actually you get to the ley lines pretty quickly, and have you got time to squeeze enough boats and get them to tack off so that you can get your tack in on the ley line, or can they hold on long enough to force you over the ley line? So this is something all these teams will be talking about and discussing whether it's an option. But we saw at that second beat of the FX race that the wind did go right quite a long way, and maybe actually the course has changed somewhat from what we saw in the 49er race this morning and that first lap of the FX race. I don't know if that big rain cloud we saw in the background maybe dragged the wind right. It's hard for us to tell, but it could be a very different race.
Yeah, you could expect that. I think often you see the cloud and you go, oh, we should go towards that. There's going to be a shift that way, and yet it had been lingering for kind of, you said, the hour and a half, and we weren't really seeing it come through. And I think in many ways that's good as well, because it might then kill all the breeze altogether. So just linger there. Let us finish our medal racing, please, rain cloud. But we know we're very close to getting the 5-minute gun for the NACRAs. And I think we just spoke about how Ben and Nicola had such a great day yesterday. We could go to the Italians, who've had a great week. At points in time, Andy, they had 4 bullets in a row earlier in the qualifying series, but then yesterday we finally saw a little chink in their armor with the 22nd and 11th in the final 2 races.
Yeah, it looked like they were going to run away with this regatta in the same vein, really, as we've seen the Olympic champions in the 49er and the FX dominating their fleets. But a bit like Burling and Tuke in the 49er, when the wind softened, they looked more vulnerable, and we've seen the same with the Italians. I think when the boat's up on foils, it's a very different technique, and the boat speed of the Italians really comes into play. When they're sitting in the water, then the Italians are looking mortal. They're not looking that different to the rest of the fleet.
I think it's fun to watch the catamarans when it's so much lighter than the breeze. We saw it yesterday. We presumably might see it today when there's breeze and both of them are out on the wire, just like in the 49er and the FX. Then it looks like fun and it looks amazing. But on days like yesterday, where the crew was sometimes laying across the bow all the way on the hull forward, I don't know if that is agony, because perhaps it's more comfortable in a way than being crouched in the mast of the 49er.
They look nice and stretched out, aren't they? At least, yeah. We'll have to ask them, but it certainly looks like a fairly comfortable position, as long as you don't have to move too often from side to side.
So you can see now this is the NACRAs, I think, about 1 minute to their orange flag going up, which is about the 6 minutes to their start. So again, the race course, from what we just saw earlier, slightly about the same amount of breeze, but maybe much further to the right than what we saw it set up for the FX, Hannah.
Yeah, potentially. It looks like they've maybe moved the start line slightly round to the right a little bit, aiming slightly more towards Weymouth and Chesil Beach than we were before. So yeah, it looks like we have had a slight right-hand wind shift. So potentially a far more open racetrack, I think we're going to look out for this race, and we might see a much more split fleet with some going left and some going right, and almost fingers crossed as to which side comes in.
That's Lynn Senholt and CP Lubeck sailing away from us with the Danish flag on their sail. One of the teams where it's the girl skippering the boat and it's the man at the front doing the crewing. So we see a little bit of both going on in this fleet. Let's see, we got, I think, 3 women helming and 7 men helming in this fleet.
In the medal racing, and there were points this week where the Denmark team were leading the regatta altogether. So you can see now they've dropped to 4th, and that was after yesterday's 8-20-13. That's an expensive day for a team who was sitting in 2nd place yesterday. Compare that to the Brits who've done so well at the top of the scoreboard yesterday, the 2-1-2, and even John Gimson and Anna Burnett with a 3-8-9 just catapulted them into 2nd and 3rd. But the points are all still so very close. So what we were just trying to show you there a second ago, the Italians sit on 55, the Brits on 59, the second Brits on 61, just 2 points back. So that's only 1 point in between them, or 1 place in between them in this race. And then the Danish on 63, and the Argentinians on 64, and even all the way to 6th place, the second Italian team on 67. So realistically, any of those 6 can medal any of the 6 could actually win this regatta if the points were to sit in such a way, Hannah, that it ended up that way. But that's a tight medal race coming up.
It's really tight, and it's really exciting for us to watch. As you said, there's 12 points separating the top 6 boats, and with a double points medal race, 12 points doesn't actually go that fast. So yeah, I think unlike the FX race we just saw, where there was a bit more looking around to see who you had to beat and who you had to cover and protect, this race is a lot more open with 6 boats. You really can't control all those boats, so for everyone it's going to be about executing a good start, getting up to speed, getting to the side of the course you think is going to be favoured, getting around that first lap, and then addressing, okay, what do I have to do now?
Sometimes even what do you have to do now, we were talking about it last time, it's compared to your competitors, but here it might be compared to the race course again, and just looking at how variable it's been this afternoon. That storm cloud you can see still sitting there just to the left now of camera, but probably that's almost directly upwind of this race course, so still it's going to be very much affecting the breeze that the sailors are racing in. And I think getting a tiny bit lighter here. They haven't actually gone up with the orange flag, so earlier the PRO was telling us it was coming. There's a slight delay perhaps as they're rejigging the course here, Andy, and again we've seen it much shiftier today even than we've seen for the majority of the week, really.
Yes, we have, and for a lot of the week we've had the wind blowing out of the east, which is a really unusual wind direction, and for it to last as long as it did, and wow, was it cold when it was doing that as well. I mean, it's only warmed up a little bit since then. Summer seems a little bit late arriving this year.
We already had it. We had a weekend of it.
That was in March, right?
Yeah, and now it's gone.
Easter weekend was summertime.
Exactly.
4-day window.
So maybe they are having to reshift the course accordingly, but we've heard nothing but good feedback from the sailors and from coaches about the race management this week. They've been banging out races really, really quickly and efficiently. So I think there's a lot of trust and faith in the race officering this week. A lot of experience gained from the build-up to London 2012 and executing a very successful Olympic Games itself 7 years ago. But even though it's 7 years ago, a lot of that residual expertise and experience still exists here and is there to be called upon for major regattas like this.
Even the number of volunteers that they can call upon for a week like this, I think it's over 100 volunteers helping out running the racing.
Yes, yeah, such enthusiasm for it. It was incredible. I thought those volunteer outfits for London 2012 were some of the ugliest outfits I've ever seen. But they had such cachet by the end of the games. They were changing hands for hundreds of pounds on eBay. So even the uncoolest, most unfashionable pieces of kit, once they've got a bit of Olympic fairy dust sprinkled on them, can fetch hundreds of pounds on eBay.
Well, everyone loves a bit of kit, and if it's Olympic kit, right, then it's even that much better. So you can see now there is plenty of breeze when they're doing their upwind runs. They are at least always flying a hull, which was more than we saw in the racing yesterday, and they were still able to race with both hulls in the water. So I think we're just probably waiting for the breeze to stabilize, as we said, before they get this race off. But good to see the teams going upwind. This is the Austrian team of Thomas Zajic and Barbara Matz. They were third in last year's World Championships, but they haven't necessarily had the best week here so far, sitting ninth overall, who we just saw doing their last run there. But it's been really difficult for the NACRAs to really determine who is going to be in the medal contention, hasn't it?
Yeah, it does seem to be very open. I think part of that is that they're still on such a fast learning curve, because after Rio 2016, after 4 years of experience gained, they then put the full hydrofoils on, and it was pretty much a reset. And we saw the French so dominant in the first Olympic cycle for the NACRA. The French are just another nation now. They're still competent and competitive, but they're not running away with things. And if anyone is looking dominant so far in this cycle, you'd say it's the Italians. They're certainly the standout team, but even they are not dominating all the time. So I think it's going to be very, very open, and the rate of progress with which they're learning how to sail these boats is still coming on leaps and bounds. So wherever you are this year, you've got a bit less than 18 months before the games itself. There's still a lot more learning to be done, and a good example of that is John Gimpson and Anna Burnett going down to Uruguay. Most of the Europeans stayed in Europe and did their training in Portugal over the winter, but they took themselves down to South America and did some big wind, big wave training down there, and I think that's why we've seen them do so well in the early part of the week here, when people were talking about Tokyo Light. sort of what it might be like, the big waves that you get for the Olympic venue next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for John and Anna, it was make or break. It was we need to do something slightly different this winter to get the gains that we need to really be attacking for that top spot and attacking for the British sailing team qualification position for Tokyo 2020. And so they made that bold decision to split away from the rest of the British squad. And so far, they're really reaping the rewards. They're right up there in pretty much every regatta they've been to this year. So, we'll have to see how this medal race plays out. It's really tight. It's a who beats who with the other British team, Ben Saxton, Nicola Boniface. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on that battle.
From a selector's point of view, that's almost a perfect scenario, isn't it? You've got two very equal teams, and you've got a great high-pressure situation to be able to benchmark how these teams respond to that pressure.
Yeah, I don't know if it's perfect or not, to be honest. I think if I was a selector, I'd rather just have someone stand out winning and make it nice and easy. But for sure, in terms of a pressure test, this is as good as it gets. Like we just saw with the Dutch FX team, that was a super high pressure test. This is the same for these guys, and they will be dog eat dog out there. They'll want to beat each other so badly, but they mustn't lose sight of everyone else in that mix and still keep themselves in the medals.
I think the one other thing we could just briefly mention is we are missing two of the top NACRA teams, Santiago Longa and Cecilia from Argentina, who had won the Olympics in Rio. The gold medalists not here this week, nor are Jason and Lisa from Australia. However, the Outeridge siblings did sneak into the medal race, as we said this morning, and talk about a learning curve and the ability to jump into a new boat and a new class with a new teammate. Nathan has done that, Hannah, and he's done fine out of it so far.
I mean, he has, but time is really starting to run out for these guys, and it's going to be tough to get that qualification spot because their Australian teammates, Jason Waterhouse and Lisa Darmanin, have been absolutely smashing it this year. They've won 3 of their last NACRA 17 regattas. They're not here. We think an injury due onto Jason has prevented them from coming to Weymouth and being in this regatta, but time is running out for Nathan and Hayley, and so they're going to really have to step up their learning curve to be in with a shout.
If Nathan didn't make it to the Games, that would be quite some time since Nathan Outeridge hasn't competed in the Olympic Games. He's been in every one since 2008, and he pretty much almost won a medal in each of them. He didn't quite get a medal out of that crazy high win medal race in Beijing, but he certainly went there as the favourite, and things worked out very differently. But you wonder if he doesn't make it this time, have we seen the last of Nathan Outeridge at an Olympic Games? He's got other things. He's got other fish to fry, and he's got babies to bring up now.
He does have a new son, a 4-month-old son, Jack. But I think it does also go to credit how deep the Australian squad is, that we are even having that conversation that Nathan Outeridge might not, a double Olympic medalist, might not be at the Games because there's another medalist who has the ability to go in the same class. And I think Jason and Lisa have shown they've been a really strong team this year. They've won the past 3 NACRA events in a row. So unfortunate injury at SailGP. I think they'll probably recover well from that. You hope so. I know he's had back issues in the past, and he's been able to recover from them and continue sailing the NACRA, which is a very physical boat anyway. But this is the NACRA results as they stand going into this medal race. You can see just how tight that battle is, as we were saying, for the top 6 places. Really, anyone could win because it's only 12 points from 1st to 6th. And then just falling off the back there, 30 points back, 7th place, Gemma Jones and Jason Saunders. But even for them in 7th, they're excellent NACRA sailors together.
Yeah, they've been a strong team for the past 4 years, and so far for this 4 years, we often see them fighting it out on the podium. So they'll maybe be a little bit disappointed with this week, not to be a lot closer to that battle for the medals. But at this point in the quad for them, it's all about learning. I don't think they've got any sort of a selection battle for that spot for Tokyo. So the pressure's off a little bit right now, and it's all about learning as much as they can for next year.
So out of the top 10 that we've got in this medal race, the only 2 that currently hold Olympic medals are in 9th and 10th. Thomas Zajac, who got the bronze medal in the NACRA in Rio 2016, and Nathan Outeridge, who we just spoke about, 2 medals, a gold and a silver in the 49er. So that's some measure of the quality further down this medal race fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tara Pacheco in 8th place, Spanish team. She is a 470 world champion back in 2011. So a really impressive field we've got in the top 10 of this NACRA fleet, coming from all different classes, which is great to see.
The nice thing about the NACRA is you've got the crossover of monohull sailors moving into multi-hulls maybe for the first time in their career, and you've got career multi-hull sailors enjoying extending their career in the multi-hull and in a different type of foiling configuration. And then also the male and female, the great experiment of a few years ago, which since has been well proven to work extremely well. And as you said earlier today, Hannah, you're really excited for the future of the 470 as being a compulsory mixed class going forwards for Marseille 2024.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's the perfect move for the 470. It's an amazing Olympic class. I think it offers so much in the strong winds. We can get out in the big waves and swell and stuff and still sail. So it's great from that perspective. I think the male and female mix is the ultimate class for that, because males and females can helms, males and females can cruise, and I think it'll be a really close fought thing as to which comes out on top. We're still discussing the NACRA as to which is the best way round, and I think the 470 will be a really great class for the mixed category.
Okay, we're sitting here waiting for the breeze to settle, waiting for the shifts to settle. When you know how much is on the line for a race like this, how close the points are for the top 6, how do you deal with this sort of a postponement like this, mentally, physically even? I mean, you can see some boats still sailing around, other boats rafted up on their coach boat. What is the Hannah Mills way of taking on a postponement like this before a medal race?
Yeah, it's different for everyone. Sailing is such a unique sport, and there's so many approaches that work depending on the person. For me, I like to kind of switch off just a little bit, keep the mood pretty chilled, chat with our coach, with Ailey, my crewmate, until we feel like we really need to switch on. And for me, that marks the orange flag going up potentially, or if you feel like the wind's in and solid, then you'll get your compass numbers and you'll start evaluating the course. But some people, they just like to stay switched on the whole time, and we can see some of the guys here still doing runs upwind, getting their compass numbers, staying on top of the wind. It's different for everyone, but I like to switch off a little bit.
And then what are the steps, the switching on? You've talked about the compass numbers, evaluating the course, looking at the starting line, I'm sure. What's the method to getting that organization and doing that homework?
Yeah, so it's about information gathering, like you just said, and we'll look at wind and we'll decide, actually we think the right's maybe better, or maybe we think the left's better, and then we'll try and sail up that side of the course just to really suss it out and see what we think of that side of the course, get our compass numbers, get the shift range, the max left and the max right that we're experiencing. Often we'll ask our coach what numbers they're getting on their compass, and then we'll put that to the start line and see what is the start line square to. Is it square to a really right shift? Is it square to a really left shift? And that then gives us a bit of a strategy for where we're going to start, depending on what the start line is set up to. So that's kind of the process we'll go through. We'll obviously also check our settings, check our jib positioning, making sure that's set up for the lulls and for the gusts. And then we'll talk about the priorities, what is going to be the key things, what's going to win the race, what's going to keep us in the race if we've had a bad start, what's our plan B, is always a good one to talk through. But yeah, what's our priority? What communication is going to be really key to get right and to be really on? Is it going to be the fleet, where they're going? Is it going to be the course? Maybe it's a really long tack, one tack. There's so many variables, and it's about prioritising what is the winning move.
Okay, so then that's the next step. We've talked about a lot, but you're quite familiar with Weymouth. You're quite familiar with this Portland Harbor race course that they're in. Now that the breeze has gone that bit further right than earlier, what do you think is the winning move on this part of the race course? Yeah,
from our limited viewpoint, I think the wind has maybe gone past that 230 degrees, and it's now coming slightly more off Weymouth. I think that cloud might have been a factor in that, and so often the race course really opens up now, and you can get some quite big righties towards the top right of the course. So I'd be really eyes out for that, and I think the pressure's really visible when you're sailing out. I know the contrast of the light's not great today, so it's going to be a little bit harder to see the puffs and lulls, but it is quite visible in the flat water, so really eyes out and planning ahead. How can I connect the dots? How can I get to the next patch of wind before the boat's around me? And just being confident and backing yourself, and if you need to tack and duck some boats, then make it happen. Don't just sit and wait for other people to make your decisions. It's it's a really changeable race course, so you have to be really proactive.
Okay, I think there's also some proactive viewers out there right now. We are hearing word that our website might be just shortly down. If you guys can all stop clicking refresh, we will let you know when the racing is on. At the moment, the scores haven't changed. So I think just a little bit of extra website traffic is giving us some issues on this end. And we are trying to get that sorted, and we'll get it back to you as soon as we can. But of course, as we explained earlier, if you do want to watch on the tracker, as we've got both the screen open and the tracker open. When the website is up, it'll be on the right-hand side, live tracking. And I've just heard from our director that we should have 1 minute to the orange flag, which basically means we're about 6 minutes away from the start, and that is exciting. We've talked about 6 boats. The number 6 seems to be stuck in my mind at the moment, but there's 6 boats in this fight, and there's only 12 points from first to 6th place, and they've been doing their different strategies of how to deal with this postponement period of time, but realistically, we can see them all sailing back towards what's going to be the start line now, and I think it looks like the race course has been set up and has been set, as Hannah said, slightly further to the right now. You can even see the harbor wall behind them, which means we've just got that bigger angle to the right, and it's going to be a wide open race course, which might mean we have some really tight racing at the top, Andy.
Yeah, and the good thing is that Hannah probably knows this Portland Harbour better than most of the sailors out here. We saw them take a while, the NACRA sailors, when we were following them in Portland Harbour, to click into the fact that the other day left was paying, different angle to what we're talking about today, but they're going to have to feel their way up this race course, and the lessons learned from the previous 2 races today, the 49er Gold Fleet and the FX medal race that we saw just now, may not be relevant experience as far as feeding into what you do in this race. So maybe we're back to that old Stevie Morrison word of control.
Maybe. I think the medal race kind of throws that rule book a little bit out the window, because there is only 10 boats and it is a short course, and I think there's an element of control, but there's an element of just having a strategy and executing it, and backing yourself to do that in this medal race. I think for the first leg you have to do that, and then the control comes into the second lap. If you're in control of your destiny, or if you're not, what do you do about it?
Okay, and in terms of the points, the coach and Olympic silver medalist in the 470, Morgan Reeser, I'm sure you know him very well. His thing is never look at the points until the final day. It's irrelevant to how you race, go in a race, what the point situation is overall. But coming into a race like this, these sailors, particularly the 6 we're talking about, will be acutely aware of the points, won't they?
They'll be all over it, yeah. Well, I'd hope, anyway. For sure, like, you have to know it like the back of your hand. You have to be really confident in what you need to do at any given moment around the race course, and if you don't know the points, you can't do that. It's really tough for these guys with 6 boats in the mix. I don't think I've ever been in a race so tightly fought with so many boats. It's going to be a real challenge to know what you have to do, but ultimately if you just go and win the race, then that would be great. Done.
That makes it nice and easy, doesn't
it? Coach Hannah, just go win the race.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Let everything else happen behind you. Well, it looks like the results are up now on the website, and again, we've got NACRA results very, very tight. We think, can you see the, yeah, we can see the NACRA flag up there on the race committee boat, so we're inside of 4 minutes at the moment, and just probably the final up and run here for the Austrians. The NACRAs can't sit nearly as easily on the start line as we were watching with the 49ers. They don't have the ability to have that same control, so we should see a bit more further back off the line, a bit more tussling for a longer period of time, not the whole 3 minutes of sitting bang on spot, right, Andy?
I would have thought so. I'm not familiar enough with their sort of lining up patterns. I would have thought they could still maintain reasonable control close to the line, but they might want to give themselves a bit more of a runway. I mean, what we saw with the 49ers earlier, they were doing to the nth degree in Miami. They were lining up 8 minutes before the start, above the start line, and using the light winds to drift them back across the start line so that the boats behind them actually had to keep clear and accept that they were going to be a second row start. I mean, lining up 8 minutes before the start is incredible. I think we'll still see some early lineups in terms of trying to book their spot, and I would have thought that. I mean, we don't have NACRA experts on our team right now, but I would have thought, Hannah, that the pin end lured start position would still be strong in a boat like a NACRA. The ability to put the bow down and get some grip on the foils.
Yeah, I think in a short line, small fleet, the pin end start is often powerful. Just because you can choose your VMG and sail probably faster than the rest of the fleet, who might be in a bit of a pinch off above you. So it gives you that opportunity to extend. But I think when it's this light, there's less of that opportunity. I think even for the NACRA, it's a bit more displacement sailing, and there's less moding options available to put the bow down and really rip. But I don't actually know. I've not sailed a NACRA 17, so we'll have to wait and see. But I think we're coming into the 2.5 minutes to go now, and very different to the 49erFX. They're a lot further back, lining up even this far out. So I think it is going to be a slightly different starting strategy. They take a lot longer to get up to speed, and obviously if you can hit that line at full speed compared to someone who sat on the line and then has to accelerate, that's going to be a big difference, and you're going to shoot yourself into the lead.
Shoot yourself into the lead. I think launch yourself into the lead.
Or launch, yeah. You could shoot, but maybe you'll launch.
Ideally what we're looking for. So we've got 2 minutes to go, 10 boats on the line, 6 of them could win this regatta. In many ways, it's all on for the Brits. The second and third place, Ben Saxton, Nicola Bonifacian, John Gimson, and Anna Burnett. And I know you can't tell us how their actual qualification system goes, Hannah, but this is an important moment for those two teams.
Absolutely, sort of regardless of the qualification for that test event spot, these two always want to beat each other no matter what the stakes. So it's going to be a hard-fought battle. I'm sure we'll see some attacking manoeuvres, some defensive manoeuvres, particularly between those two boats. I actually can't wait to watch it.
Talking about the outer ridges earlier, Oz 46 looked like they were about to be setting up there for a port tack start. I think they've either just bailed on that, or we're just trying to let the fleet set up and then go and choose their hole, be the shark at the moment on port, tacking in at the last second to figure out where their hole is. One of the GBR teams, it looks like GBR 21, which is John Gimson and Anna Burnett, wanting the pin here, as well as the New Zealanders, Gemma Jones and Jason Saunders. So should be a close, tight battle there. 50 seconds to go with the pin. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure there's enough room there for GBR, so they're going to have to bail out. At least I would assume they're going to have to bail out and go up the line, but it doesn't look like. There they go. Back around, 40 seconds to go. That's a tough spot to be for John and Anna right now.
It's a tough spot. They clearly wanted the pin, and they lined up just a little bit too early, and so now they're kind of on the back foot because they can't execute their strategy that they ideally wanted. And this is where, if they've thought about a plan, or they might be coming back in to have another go here. We've got 20 seconds, and that's going to be a really tight spot. Or maybe it looks like they're lining up to start on port and head out to the right-hand side and duck the fleet, but the whole rest of the fleet are lining up on starboard. They look like they've gone pretty early, but I think our timer might be slightly out, so hopefully no one over the start line.
Sounds like possibly we've just heard that a postponement flag went up on the race committee just before the start there, so we can't actually see by eye the red and white flag, but I think maybe we saw the sailors all trim it and go because perhaps that's the case. But that's not what we're seeing at the moment in terms of how they're sailing. So let's at least address this race as is. If they continue racing, the Italians have a good start, Andy.
They certainly do. Italy 5 on the left of picture, Bissaro and Frascari, really good starts, slightly better than the Kiwis on the far left. The Argentinians very solid all week, looking good in the middle of the line, but we see the Argentinians turning down, so is that the first sign that we are on a postponement? We see the Italians and the Kiwis still continuing.
I think we just had a really big right shift there. Everyone was very high off on starboard there, so I think it definitely looks like we've had an AP with a couple of boats heading back now. I think they were probably all just checking out their boat speed on each other just to see how they were going before turning back. So I think we're going to change the race course a little bit, square it up, and then we'll be straight back into the 5 minutes.
Was that a get out of jail card there for John Gibson and Anna Burnett, do you think?
A little bit. I think at least they were heading to the right with that right shift, so potentially it could have panned out pretty well if that wind shift was a permanent feature, which, maybe there's a rain cloud over there. We can't quite see from here, so we don't know.
So, I mean, it didn't look like that was their first choice, but the plan B might have well worked out to be better than plan A.
Yeah, and you know what? When you get off the start line and you have a good start on starboard and you watch some people get spat out and tack behind you and head right, the frustration you feel when they come in ahead of you at that windward mark is it's pretty annoying, because that wasn't their intended plan. So and it's amazing how often that does happen.
And what about when it happens to you? Was it great judgment?
Or it's great judgment. Yeah, exactly.
So that was unfortunate timing, or depends where you were on that start line. Maybe some people are quite grateful that it was abandoned and that we go round again for another start in a moment.
I think it allows the nerves to settle a little bit, doesn't it? Sometimes there's so much pent-up energy prior to a start that actually you then can get the start off, even with the AP there. And that the butterflies, the moment that you have here on pre-start, it settles a little bit, even though there's a next start coming up in a way.
Yeah, it actually really does. I often don't mind a general recall on the first start, just because of that thing. There's so much sort of tension held in you, and there's such a release once you get off that start line, because you're finally racing. So yeah, sometimes for people it's no bad thing, and actually they might all just be able to take a breather, decide whether their strategy was the right one, and maybe adjust it for the next start.
Now that you've won gold and you won silver at the Olympic Games, I imagine pressure doesn't come higher than that. Does it make it easier to deal with pressure at major events like European Championships?
I guess it makes it easier in a way. I think you still feel the pressure for sure, it doesn't go away, but you learn about yourself and about how you deal with it, and about what you need to do to still perform when that pressure comes on, and I think your self-awareness goes up of those situations, so you do ultimately deal with it better. I think some people are naturally really good at dealing with pressure, and for some people it's a lot harder, and they have to work really hard at overcoming that. So for everyone it's different, but generally the really top competitors across all the fleets here, and any athlete will be very, very good at knowing how they respond to pressure.
And how nervous would you feel on a morning like this, the final day before a medal race in the European Championships, and how much would you want to dispel those nerves or embrace those nerves?
You certainly feel pretty nervous, particularly if there's a lot on the line in terms of medals. But for me, it's about embracing those nerves, and they come because you care, and you care about the outcome. You draw on past experiences and past successes. You think about the ones that didn't go so well and why they didn't go so well, and just trying to put all that learning into the next race, and that's all you can do. But you have to learn to embrace the pressure, otherwise it kind of just eats you up, and things start to fall apart.
Now you say that you've got a battery of competitiveness that maybe it doesn't run as full as it used to when you were younger. So just tell us a little bit about that and how you store up that battery for the right occasions.
Yeah, I think it's interesting for me anyway. When I was younger, I was really competitive, and it came so easily, that desire and that drive to win, almost at all costs. But as I've gotten older, it has sort of petered out a little bit, and I'm still very competitive, don't get me wrong, but it takes more energy for me to get to that point of wanting to win so badly that you have the mental strength to put yourself under that pressure and to deliver under that pressure. And I might not be making an awful lot of sense, but for sure my battery runs lower than it has done in the past in terms of how much energy I can put into each regatta, and so I do have to think about which ones really matter, and that's where the art of peaking, I guess, comes in, which the top athletes across sports are renowned for doing, is picking and choosing which events they're really, really going to put themselves under the highest pressure to perform at.
I think it's interesting that we've spoken about this a number of times this week about the mental energy for yourself. It's draining maybe to sail a regatta that isn't as important. For Ben, he maybe gets re-energized by sailing in other fleets. And also you spoke about peaking at 2 events so close to each other. And for the Netherlands girls, that was a conversation had because Genoa was only so recent and was so important, and they maybe didn't perform there and then had to really make sure they were at the top of their game here, and ultimately they were able to perform, but those were 2 really tight battles and really big mental games that they had to get through.
Yeah, and I don't know much about the game of peaking, but to give yourself such a brief gap between those 2 events, it does seem strange. I mean, we've often questioned the wisdom of the Dutch trial system in a number of ways, but we have to say I think they've just found 2 athletes in Annemiek Bekkering and at Duits who can really rise to the pressure, and you could see that release of pressure when they came second in that medal race just now, coming second and getting the silver medal in these European Championships, and in fact becoming European champions as well when you discount the Brazilians.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an incredible display of mental toughness, and having 2 events that close together, it is hard. But I think as an athlete, they knew the situation. They knew they had 2 events within a month that they had to peak at and perform at, and it's about getting through, and it's about knowing that in advance and preparing yourself for that. And they would have had a strategy for win or lose in Genoa, what they were then going to do to prepare themselves for this event, and they've clearly done that, and they've done that really, really well. So that was phenomenal to see.
I think even in terms of peaking on the day, I mean, we've had what some of the sailors are calling a very long week here. It's been 7 days of racing and 7 days of very varied conditions, and physically the ability to come out and sail and breeze the sorts of windy conditions they had on Monday and Tuesday that was forcing capsizes and broken poles, and then to have light air days like yesterday where you're crunched in the boat or laying on the hull, and mentally coming onto it one final day, medal racing, it all on the line. How do you store up that energy to then be able to bring it in to perform today?
Yeah, I mean, this week has been the ultimate week of toughness to get through. They've had everything, and it's been seven days long, and it's a fantastic test leading into an Olympic Games next year, because that's a really long event. Yes, you have rest days, but it's almost 9 days that you have to stay on top of your game, and for me it's about in the evenings really switching off. That's your moment to just relax, be exactly who you want to be in that moment, do whatever you need to do to switch off so that you can come back the next morning and do it all over again. And it's almost just like it is that eat, sleep, repeat thing that everyone has on t-shirts. That is what you're doing, and it is routine based, and you stick to your routines. But for me, I don't love routines so much, but I know to perform I need it, and so in the evenings I don't really have a routine. I just switch off, chill, do what comes my way, and relax, which then gives me energy to go again the next day for the routines.
What about opening ceremonies at Olympic Games? How many have you managed to make it to so far?
Well, I've done two Olympic Games. London was my first one, which was unbelievable to be a part of a home nation at an Olympic Games, and we were really fortunate. Our games were 5 days, started 5 days after the opening ceremony, and we managed to go, which was incredible. For Rio, it wasn't right for us for a number of reasons, and so we opted out. But the energy we got from going to London and the Olympic Games, we just rode off that buzz the entire time. It was absolutely phenomenal. But we were different athletes in Rio, and we needed different things. So it was right for us not to go.
I mean, talk about opening ceremonies. Pete and Blair, the flag bearers for their country. Here's the scores from earlier today. We had the final gold fleet qualification race this morning. So at the end of that, Pete and Blair, as we saw them, did have a good race, coming through from about 18th at the top mark to finish 9th and to sit still ahead on the score lines, 9 points ahead of Dylan Fletcher and Stuart Bithell, who were then just 3 points ahead of James Peters and Finn Sterrett. But a phenomenally close top 4 here for the men's. The Spanish just dropping off a little bit through the week. At points they were winning, at points they were second today, and yesterday particularly with the 15, 16, 17 just dropping down. But still, they can't drop out of 4th. So Andy, it's still a lot on for when they come up after the NACRAs later this afternoon.
Yes, yeah, I think the key battle is most likely the battle for bronze between GBR5 and the Spanish. So that's the one really to watch out for. The gaps are fairly big above them, but at least we got that one to watch out for. And Peters and Sterrett seem to have got stronger as this regatta has gone along, and they seem very comfortable in the light winds. And maybe the Spanish not quite so much. The Spanish look really, really strong in the big breeze earlier on in the week. I mean, we're still talking about world-class performances throughout the conditions, but if anything, I would say the slight advantage to Peters and Sterrett over Botin and Mara going into that fight for the bronze medal.
I mean, I think you can even see that on the scoreline as you're saying 2-5, 1-1, 2-1, 1-1. That was the breezy days, the Spanish dominating, and then the last couple of days much deeper. Many results out of the top 10, unfortunately, for the Spanish, whereas almost the flip of that for Peters and Sterrett in the past couple of days. They've had a lot of top 5 scores. So again, Dylan and Stewart as well. We had them move up from 3rd to 2nd yesterday with a 7, 12, 14, but it was just enough, especially after the day before, which was such a good day. So Pete and Blair, yeah, leading, as you said, probably it's going to be hard for 3rd is impossible to get to 1st. It's going to be hard for Dylan and Stewart to get into 1st, but maybe they could.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting situation for Dylan and Stu, because, as you said, 3rd place cannot win. So for Pete and Blair, it's a one-on-one. You know, all they have to do is match race Dylan and Stu, and they've got the gold medal. Whereas for Dylan and Stu, they can lose that 2nd spot and that European title that we've talked about. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what Pete and Blair decide to do, whether they take it to Dylan and Stu, and whether that potentially impacts their 2nd place position overall to James and Finn and Diego and Iago.
I think Pete and Blair looked pretty relaxed, not only this morning before race 1, but we just saw them just before the FXs went out. They were kind of hanging with the women's boat, talking to them before they sailed, and I think probably would have loved to have given them a little insight and a little tidbit, but it didn't quite go the way of Alex and Molly finishing 5th overall. And did they? We need to still see updated scores actually for the 49er FXs. Hopefully we'll get those to you guys shortly here, but I think realistically they did move up into 4th, so 7 points out of 3rd place. But yeah, maybe they just got a little bit of the juice and the love from the Kiwi boys to take that out of the water and move up the 1 place overall.
Yeah, I think they're a really close team, the Kiwi team. You know, they're the other side of the world to us, and a little bit on their own sometimes. So they're a really strong, close-knit team, and I'm sure they share a lot of information between each other and cheer each other on, as we all do for everyone else. But great to see those girls move up 1 spot. They'll be disappointed not to be on the podium, particularly as Andy said, after a tough regatta the other week in Genoa. But you know, they're champions. They'll come back stronger, I'm sure, this summer.
Well, speaking of champions, we have the 49er FX results up. We had the Brazilians win overall, as we said, and we had the Dutch finish 2nd, and that was hugely important for their Olympic qualifier and their status going into the Tokyo 2020 Games being confirmed. And then, of course, as we said at the time, winning the race gave the Norwegians the 3rd place overall. But we are lucky enough now in the studio to have the Dutch skipper Annemiek Bekkering join us. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Excellent regatta, and oof, what a relief.
Oh, what a relief. It was so intense, this last race. I think the whole week we've been quite consistent and quite happy. And then today we're like, okay, pressure is on, we need to sail well. And then we did really well, but then in the second up we were like, oh my god, okay, let's stay calm, let's stay sensible. But yeah, it's a relief that it all worked out.
I feel like you're still shaking.
I was going to say,
check. You can absolutely feel the energy. But talk about performing when the pressure is on. I mean, you really do seem to. Last year at the World Championships, you guys nailed it, performed when you needed to, won the world. Today, everything was on the line. And then on the line, you were winning, you know, coming out at the top mark, boom, we said another one's one has to actually take it on, and take it on you did. How did you guys do it going out into that race? What were you thinking?
Well, I think in the past we also had a few times we didn't perform under pressure, so we learned a lot from that. And now we had a few opportunities to show that we actually can do it. And I think we just approach it like every other race. And very clear on the goals, make sure we attack it, don't hold back. And especially the start. If you attack the start, then you give yourself all the options.
And you attacked it to the left.
We did attack it, yeah.
Was
Yeah.
that, well, looking at the course, was that it? Your game plan was win the pin and go left, is that?
We were not sure about left or right because it was shifting a little bit, but then just before the 5 minutes we thought, okay, the pin is so biased. If we win the pin, you already have to jump, and in the light conditions, it's just nice to lead the pack. And then we know even if it would shift right, we're still in control. And it's better to attack something than just do something like in between, because then you're not gonna.
I love that attitude. That's a great attitude.
Yeah.
And how was it that it obviously really closed up at that second beat, and heart was in mouth for us as it was for you guys.
Yeah.
Watching that final run, what was going through your head? How were you thinking? What kind of decisions were you?
Well,
trying
we
to
were
make?
quite happy because we had a comfortable lead, and we thought let's stay right of them, but then take to the left because the left was quite strong. And then we looked a few times over our shoulder, like, oh, they are gaining, but we're so close to lay, it's gonna be fine. And then we tagged, and I was like, oh, we're not gonna be fine. Okay, and then let's keep sensible, let's keep talking a lot. And then we knew if we would stay just behind the Norwegians, we would be fine. So I think rounding the top mark, we were like, okay, let's stay logical and let's keep going fast.
I like hearing that. So you said let's keep talking a lot. Is that
Yeah.
for you when the stress is high and the emotion, like the shakiness is happening on the boat?
Yeah.
Do you want to have that communication with Annette on board to kind of calm you down instead of the boat going quiet at times like that?
Yeah, because I think that our risk is that we get quiet because we both feel a bit stressed and we're both like, we don't really know. And if you just keep talking, then things are quite normal or quite logical. But if you don't talk and then you see somebody gaining on the right, like, how did that happen? And if you talk it in, it's like, okay, it makes sense, the wind is shifting right, there's more pressure, and then it's okay to make a wrong decision, but you can recover. But if we don't talk, then it's like, whoa.
I think that's it. I think that is so well explained, and I can really relate to that as a competitor and a sailor. That ability to keep talking, and that's what I mean about when the pressure comes on, is knowing how you naturally respond, and maybe that is to go quiet, but knowing that and being able to overcome that by still keeping talking and still being able to make that right decision of the jibe set, it was just phenomenal to watch. Really impressive.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming up. We are
welcome.
so impressed with how you guys sailed today, with how you sailed all week, with the pressure on your shoulders for the Tokyo qualification spot. Well sailed to also take the European Championship
Yes.
itself, the title.
Not the real one, but
leaving the Brazilians aside, their rest of world, but
They did
really,
great.
really well done, Anami.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We'll let her go and debrief and de-rig now.
Yes.
Next regatta coming up, I'm sure, is not even a thought at the moment, but such energy, such amazing performance from that team today, and so fun to like feel the heat of the energy coming off of her still.
It was incredible, yeah. They must be absolutely buzzing at like the relief and happiness they'll feel to have got that Olympic spot is just amazing. And they'll need a good while now to take it in and to let all that energy out of themselves, and then be able to refocus and rebuild up for the events this summer. And hopefully they've got a good bit of time off now to be able to do that.
I mean, I think time off in that mind space, as you said, they've had 2 peak events in 1 month in a row. The next event, this is qualifying them for the test event as well as the Olympics. So we've been talking about how for them this is a huge deal because it is their Olympics, but also it's their Tokyo this summer, their qualification event. So between now and then, the rest of the events, you think there's sort of just a breeze in their minds in some ways, and it's eyes on Enoshima?
I can't speak for them, but I think for me anyway, it would be making sure I have the downtime now to really put a strong plan in place going into the summer, and to make sure you get that training block right. This is the last summer before the Olympic Games next year, and there's going to be so much to learn about the venue. I personally feel like we've not spent much time in Tokyo. It's been so much harder than London obviously was home, and then Rio, we could sail there in the winter and in the summer and get very similar conditions, whereas in Tokyo there's a very small weather window, which sort of June to the start of September, which seems to have the same conditions we're going to get for the Olympics, which is always the period where we have lots of events elsewhere. So to get the time in the venue is imperative. So for those girls, making sure that time in the venue is really focused and structured is going to be really important.
Well, a lot of the teams this week, Andy, were calling this Tokyo Light. You mentioned it earlier, Enoshima Light in some ways, at the beginning of the week at least. Explain what that meant.
It was the rolling swell, it was the big breeze, and there's been so many light wind regattas in recent memory, and not with that sort of big swell that we've seen. It was the big swell that John Gibson and Anna Burnett went down to South America to experience those kind of conditions that they think they might be getting in Tokyo. So it's really that combination of big breeze and big rolling Pacific waves that you're going to get in Enoshima. It's a great surfing spot as well, isn't it?
It is, but you wouldn't catch me in the water because there's literally hundreds of sharks cruising around. That was something I wasn't quite prepared for last September when we went there. The amount of sharks everyone saw in Enoshima Bay. Actually saw. I thank goodness didn't, because I think I might not have ever got in the boat again. But our coach certainly saw 2 pretty massive sharks. So yeah, another challenge to overcome in Tokyo.
A capsize in a 470 happens once in a blue moon. Are you happy to be in a 470 in Enoshima rather than pitch poling in a 49erFX, for example?
I was so happy about my decision to stay in a 470 once I saw those sharks and heard how often the FX and the Niner girls and boys were capsizing out in Tokyo. It's a really challenging place to sail for those boats because the swell is so big, and generally we have pretty good breeze there. So it's going to be spectacular for all classes, I'm sure, out in Tokyo in 2020.
So Rio, it was the dirty water inside the harbor. I mean, I was sailing the test event there in the FX, and when you capsized inside the bay, it was all you could do to keep your mouth as shut as possible. I think London wins for having a good spot. Yeah, Weymouth wins for having a good spot for sailors. Sharks probably beats dirty water in my mind, I think, as a petrifying one. But where else have you seen, or where else does your team think are good places to train for Enoshima if you can't be training there July to September, June to September?
Well, I think last winter a lot of particularly Niner and FX and NACRA teams went to Vila Moura in the south of Portugal. We went there as well because you do get the big swell there, and all year round you get pretty sailable conditions. It's a little bit warmer than the UK. Weymouth in the bay in an easterly in the winter is not a place you want to be. So yeah, sort of Vila Moura for the European boat seems to be the sort of spot of choice to try and emulate the Tokyo conditions as much as possible.
Well, this out there on the race course, not necessarily emulating the Tokyo conditions at the moment. If you're only just tuning in, we are waiting for the NACRA medal race. You can see one of the NACRAs just out there in front of the race committee, but I think realistically we're waiting for them to reset the course. We saw a huge right shift in the last pre-start of the NACRAs, and they postponed just 10 seconds before the start, and I think we're not seeing that rain cloud anymore behind them. So a little bit, maybe the rain cloud sucked some of the breeze away with it, Hannah.
Yeah, I think we've definitely had a big right shift, but I think the good news is it looks like we've still got about 6 knots. Reports from the race course anyway, we've still got about 6 knots out there. So hopefully the race committee can get a new course laid quickly, and they'll be underway pretty shortly. But yeah, at least we've got a good breeze.
Hannah, just coming back to your third Olympic campaign, the first time you went, Saskia Clark, she'd already been to one game. She'd experienced 2008. London 2012 was your first games. Then you went with that experience and you won the gold medal together in Rio 2016. This time you're going with Ali McIntyre. She's never been to an opening ceremony. She's never experienced just how different and special an Olympic Games is. So how does that change your responsibilities as the senior member of the partnership?
Yeah, it really does change it quite a lot. As you said, Sass and my relationship in London and then in Rio evolved, and we really grew as a team for that Rio cycle. And for Tokyo, for me, it's about trying to give Ailey an insight into that experience of what an Olympic Games is like, and trying to emulate that pressure and that feeling as much as we possibly can at as many peak events before we get there. Firstly, so Ailey sees how I respond to that. So when it happens at the games, it's not unexpected. But secondly, so we can see how Ailey responds to that, and we can put in place what needs to be in place for both of us individually and as a team to be able to perform when the highest pressure comes on.
And maybe your priorities personally have changed because you've got so much experience in the boat now. But for Ailey McIntyre, she's still in the earlier phase of her campaign. So how do you compromise there where you've got different needs?
Yeah, we are in quite different places. I mean, Ailey's surrounded by experience her whole life. Her dad, Mike McIntyre, won a gold medal in the star class in 1988, ironically the year I was born, which he probably won't like me saying, but he did, which was absolutely incredible. And so for Ailey, she's had that gold medal literally hung outside her door since the day she was born, and so she's always aspired to win gold. So it's not like it's a sort of new concept, and she's always had that belief that she can get there. And so for us as a team, it's about using that energy and that motivation in the right way, and making sure there's not too much pressure or not too little pressure, and putting the best team we possibly can, building the best team we possibly can into Tokyo.
Talk about a motivational carrot, a gold medal hanging outside your door from birth. That's amazing. I wish I had a gold medal to hang outside the door of future aspiring Olympians, but that's a really impressive and really cool story, I think, to hear.
It sort of worked quite well for Martine Grail as well, of course, hasn't it, with her dad Torben winning 5 Olympic medals of his own.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to be said, I think, for having that role model in your life, whether that's a parent or whether that's somebody else. I think you can learn so much from people that have come before you, and to have that sort of humility and ability to accept their input and their advice and their learnings. I think it can be hard when it's a parent, perhaps, to be able to do that. So hats off, particularly to Martine, who's done that really well.
And how many generations of sailing in your family?
Roughly 0. Yeah, no, my family aren't a sailing family at all, to be honest. I sort of fell into it, and I think just loved that freedom of being on the water, and so mixed with the competition element of it, it absolutely took hold of me, and yeah, I haven't sort of looked back since I stepped into a boat at about 8 years old.
Was that in pool?
It wasn't. I grew up in Cardiff in Wales, but it was a family holiday down in Cornwall, the southwest coast of England. My parents, I think, probably wanted rid of me for a week or so pushed me out onto a sailing course, and they might live to, well, they maybe live to regret that a little bit. With the weekends travelling, taking me around the country, is a big commitment for all parents involved in bringing up a sailor.
That is a valid point. Shout out to all the parents out there who have spent countless hours on the road and in dinghy parks and in boat parks taking care of their kids' aspirations. And I think lucky for your parents, in the end, they were rewarded with not just 1, but 2 medals for their daughter. So possibly even a 3rd coming up here of some sort. How superstitious are you? When I say things like that, I looked at the wood on the table.
Did you?
Is that a thought process that goes through your mind in any way? Do you have superstitions?
Not massively, actually. I don't. I think I probably did more when I was younger, but as you get older, you learn to rely on what you've done in the past, I guess, and rely on your experience and the processes rather than the superstitions. But there's nothing wrong with a bit of superstition, I think, if it gives you that extra bit of confidence.
I like you. You said that earlier, or you let me think that earlier by saying that you don't really like routines. And so I got from that maybe there wasn't that much superstition, because people who are really into their superstitions are like, I eat this for breakfast every morning and I tap my tiller 3 times. I mean, that's a little aggressive, but there are definitely some people who massively have amounts of superstition. We are joined now by Alan Norgard. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. We're sitting here waiting to watch the NACRA's race. Unfortunately, not quite as much wind out there as we would like.
No, it looks very still out there right now. Actually, I just had a look over and totally blank. Yeah, it's not looking very good right now. So hopefully we'll get some at some
Expecting
point.
some breeze, fingers crossed.
Yes.
We've all got fingers crossed out there. How has the week been for you?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a tough week for us here. We started up with a new team here a couple of months ago, so just to try out a little. But it's been a very steady event here with which been a lot on speed, and we haven't really been on speed for this event, so it's been difficult for us here. But it's good fun to try out and get a little feel for what it is being in the boat. I've been in the coach boat for a couple of years, and so it's nice to get back into a little bit of sailing, see it from that side again.
And then does it make you want to stick with it from that side, or what are the conversations being had in the Denmark world at the moment?
Yeah, actually we were trying out for since Palma and then to now, and then we were going to decide if we were going to go all in until the games or not. But actually just today we decided to pull out and not do it, because I don't really have the time to do it proper and put the time in that it really needs, because these boats are not easy to sail, and it really needs, even with a couple of campaigns behind us, together with Katja, which also won a bronze medal last time in the FX, and we gave it a shot here to see if that was something that we should keep going on, but it was me that with the family back home and not really able to see myself putting in the time that was really needed for this. So I decided today to call it and go a little bit back, maybe to the coach boat for some time, and back to the family a little bit. So that's the news, yeah.
Fair enough, Alan. We spoke about them earlier because, as he just mentioned, Katja Iversen had sailed in the 49er FX, winning the bronze medal with Jena Hansen in Rio, and then Jena had retired last summer to move into the coach boat, is coaching the Danish teams in the 49er FX here. And so Katja jumped in with you, and I think was really excited to try a new boat. I mean, she's such an eager personality. She lives and breathes sailing. I'm sure she was such a shining light to sail with.
She's amazing. She's really, really good sailor, and really fun to sail with her, and she's super good. So, I mean, I couldn't have had anyone better than her to do it with. So it was all on my own time, and realizing how much time it would need to actually have a middle chance in the end. So realistically, it was not going to happen with the time that I could put in. So that's why I decided to go and do something else.
Fair enough. We understand that. I think particularly, you know how much time it takes to win a medal. But what is the coach boat path going to be then? Do you know who you will be?
No, I really don't know right now.
He's available, everyone.
There you go.
Well, maybe I'll go home and start a farm, or I don't know. Maybe just try something new.
Right.
No, I don't know.
Well, there's a family at home that I'm sure is going to be happy to have more time with you, and
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Alan, for coming in. Congratulations, anyways, on having given it a shot, and we look forward to seeing you in the coach boat. He's available, you guys. Excellent. Well, we can still see that the NACRAs are still in a slight variation of postponement. As Alan and Hannah, we were just saying, hopefully there's going to be breeze. It should be building. We've got Andy coming back in he's peeking out the window here to see if we can see from the commentary box anything more than we can see on the cameras themselves. It sounds like it's just very up and down out there. It's very shifty, not only with the clouds, but you can sort of see the breeze phasing in and out in many ways.
Yeah, I think the problem is now we've got a bit of a battle between this northerly breeze that's come back in, potentially with that rain cloud, pulling it back to the north, and the southwesterly that we had earlier. So I think it's going to be light and shifty out there, and really challenging for the race committee to get a fair race, because ultimately, we want a race and we want a good race, but the sailors certainly won't want a tricky, potentially unfair race to decide the medalists.
I think that's a valid point. We've got such close scores for the NACRAs, and to go out there and then to have it all be fluky, I think would be not the expectation we would have of a race committee like this. And I think we know that they're such a good top level race committee here that once they do have steady breeze, we should see the orange flag go up, and we should see them go, but they're not going to send the sailors in something that they don't think is good racing conditions.
No, absolutely not. I think it's been such an incredible week, as we've spoken about a lot today, but it has been phenomenally run, and we don't want to finish on a bad one. So yeah, the race committee will have to be absolutely certain that their course is set up right, and they want to make sure that for the sailors it's the right race to run.
Andy, you took a peek out the window. Any extra thoughts from what we can see up here on high that we're not seeing on the cameras out there?
There's a bunch of flags that are always blowing out there. We've got every nation. It's like United Nations of flags out there, and they're always blowing. So when I see those flags flying, I think there's always hope.
Well, you can see flags flying out on the race committee boat, and you can sort of see just the one NACRA is sailing decently past them. So presumably there's enough breeze, and if it's steady, then we should have this race in place soon. Again, it's funny to watch the different styles of who does what during the off times. And we were talking about this earlier. Hannah likes to turn off, just mentally take a break. Maybe even at this point, it's been an hour or so maybe there's some food or some water that needs to go in to rehydrate, to make sure everyone's fully up to gear, because it's almost coming on 4 p.m. for sailors who've been out there for now an hour or two. But granted, they had a long time this morning to get ready for the medal races.
Yeah, it's been a lot of waiting around for them today, unfortunately, which is in stark contrast to the other days where, particularly on the windy days, they've been out, got their races in really quickly, packed up, put the covers on, and still had half a day to get some downtime. And so this is unfortunately not the way that we'd like to finish the regatta, but the sailors will still remember that across the 7 days they've still had some phenomenal racing.
Exactly, and I think when we do, or hopefully if we get racing, it's going to be a real challenge for these guys to mentally turn back on. I think they'll have got themselves so ramped up for this race, particularly those top 6 battling out for the medals, and to have this long postponement on the water. It is about now who can turn it on when it matters, and who can flick that switch and get right back ramped up to where they were when they probably first got out here. It's always a challenge as a sailor to do that, and I'm sure all this top 10 are very capable of doing it. But you have to get into that attacking mindset for the medal race, because it is the final race. There is no more races after this, and the finality of that can hit quite hard in the build up to a medal race.
I think realistically, we just saw the Argentinians there talk about being fired up. They won the last race of yesterday, so they are hoping to battle on the water as much as they can. Speaking of battling on the water, earlier today, we had the 49er FXs out. We had a medal race for them just before the breeze went light, and I'm trying to take a look at how the Danish team, Denmark 7, went in that medal race, because we have crew from Denmark 7, Marie Olsen, just joining us in the studio. Marie, how did the race go for you?
I think the race was a medium race for us. We didn't really come good up after the start, but I think after the start we made some good decisions. So it was a hard race, and I'm happy with a lot of our decisions.
How about for the week in general? I mean, you've finished 6th here on the scoreline, so yeah, a 7th in the medal race. 6th overall. Happy or?
We had really been hoping and fighting for a medal to this regatta, and apparently we didn't succeed. And I think that's of course super annoying. We were hoping for more, but I think we had a lot of good races during this regatta, and we just need maybe a tiny bit more speed in the breezy wind, and then we will be there.
We were talking about speed the other day with you guys, I think, in an interview in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And that was on a windier day that we spoke about speed. Is it in the breeze that you think you're struggling speed, or all the way across through the...
I don't think we're struggling with speed. We are definitely in top 5 speed-wise. Just sometimes we just need that little extra to separate from the fleet.
The extra gun power that speed gives you.
Everyone needs that.
We spoke about that, I think, in general, as it allows you to get out of lanes or stay in lanes, or maybe make that extra 10th to 6th jump if you're that tiny bit faster. But who do you think actually maybe has that speed advantage in the FX?
Looking at the results now, it's hard not to say that Brazil probably has that little extra speed-wise, I think. But they have also been making some super good starts during this week. At least what I have been seeing, not when I haven't been in my own boat. So I think they're the ones to beat at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. And they were the winners here. We saw them take the gold medal earlier. For you guys, though, what is it now looking forward? What is the training schedule like for Denmark? There were 2 teams in the top 10. Do you train together? Do you look towards the test event? What's going on?
At the moment, we're still training together as a squad. We're going to be in Denmark for the next almost 3 months, actually, just until Japan. I think we're going to have some super good conditions, as everyone have seen. Aarhus has some super good conditions, both the wavy and offshore, and I think it's going to be a really good practice for Japan. Then we here qualified for the test event, so we will be the team going to the test event in Japan. So that will be the next.
Congratulations!
Yeah, congratulations!
Thank you. So that will be like the next regatta for us. Oh, we're going to Kiel, but Japan is more important.
Excellent. Okay, well, do you think Denmark, and I've just heard we've got 1 minute to the orange flag, so final question for you. Do you think Denmark is a good place to train for Enoshima. We were talking about how this is Tokyo Light in some ways earlier this week. The rolling swell is familiar to that. Hannah was talking about Villamora. Is Denmark going to be good practice?
I think in Denmark we don't have this big swell as we have seen in Japan. So in that sense it's not. But I think from my experience in September this year, I think the offshore breeze is super similar. And the way the wind moves over the water is the same. So I think for sure ours is a good practice place.
Oh, that's exciting. Is it your home where you're going to be practicing?
Yeah, it's also my home. But we got a new sailing center and everything. The setup is there.
Oh, excellent. Well, enjoy the next 3 months. Congratulations on winning the test event spot. Well sailed, even if it wasn't a medal. I think that's really, really well sailed. Thanks for joining us, Marie.
Thank you very much.
So we've just said, we've heard that we're about to be into the starting sequence here for the NACRAs. You can see now the orange flag has just gone up on that race course, and that was Marie Olsen, who finished in 7th place, Denmark 7 over the regatta. But exciting news for them, they've gotten the test event spot.
Really exciting news, and that test event spot, I know some nations don't necessarily put much weighting on that, but for us it's always, or personally, it's such a key indicator for the Olympics next year, and such valuable experience racing in the Olympic venue at the right time of year with an Olympic sized fleet. You know, here we've seen bigger fleets than we'll see at the Olympic Games, and so it's just invaluable experience, I think, to get that test event spot if you are a serious contender for a medal in 2020.
But I think it sounds like there aren't really that many places that are like Enoshima, so you'd rather be racing there, right, Andy, than racing anywhere else.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any substitute, especially for such special conditions as they have, and also so many sharks. Where do you replicate so many sharks in the water?
Australia, perhaps.
Yes, yeah.
Maybe San Francisco. We've got some great whites out in San Francisco that are
we don't need
a little
that.
bit too scary. Yeah. Okay. So
Sharks like surfing as well, by the way. They actually do like surfing. A South African friend of mine was telling me when he's surfing his laser down the waves down in South Africa, often the little hammerhead sharks join in with him.
That sounds awful to me. Like, that's not what I need when I'm surfing down a wave, to see a hammerhead shark pop up next to me. Hopefully that won't happen in Japan.
a dolphin, yes. A shark, no.
Yeah, very different.
All right, let's talk about the sharks who could be stealing the medals from the guys at the top here. We've spoken about the top 6 all in contention for the medal race positions. At the moment, it is the Italians, but as we said yesterday, they showed some chinks in their armor. They're only 4 points out of second position, Ben Saxton and Nicola, who are then only 3 points ahead of John Gimson and Anna Burnett. 2 points back from that, the Danish, who were winning at periods of time this week, and then just 1 point back to the Argentinians and another 3 to the Italians. So you guys all on here in the next 3.5 minutes when we see the NACRA start. Can I ask who we have bets on? I'm speaking to 2 Brits, so I know maybe there's some questions there, but Hannah, go for it.
Oh, bets on. I think, oh God, that's
I'm going to stick my hand up if you don't go first. I'm going to say Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface, based on the fact that they had such a good day yesterday in these kind of conditions, and I think that they rise to the pressure and the occasion very well as well. So I've bagged them. So who does that leave you then, Hannah?
Understood. I think you can't ever rule out the Italian pair who are currently leading. I think they've won so many regattas last year that they clearly know how to perform in a medal race. So but as we said, there's 6 boats in this battle for all the medals and the gold medals. So we're just going to have to hold on and see what happens.
We'll see what happens. We can see right now 10 boats on the line, 10 boats getting ready to be lined up. And that was the 4-minute flag. That was the U flag just going up there. So exactly within 4 minutes here. Still plenty of time before we see them line up the way that the 49ers do the NACRAs. Last time it was about 2, maybe even 1 minutes to go. And we saw a couple guys not quite having the best strategy, having to bail out at the pin. John Gimson, before that, it was the outer edges who were sitting on port waiting for a spot. At this race course, looking at it, Hannah, which side do you think you'd want?
I mean, we can't really see the racecourse too well, but all I know now is the wind has definitely settled in this northerly direction, which is renowned for being very shifty, very patchy. So I wouldn't actually like to choose. I'd want to have my head out the boat. I'd want to be looking up the racecourse. And for the NACRAs, they really need to think further ahead because manoeuvres are costly for these guys. So actually, they need to be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead to position their boats for that patch of pressure that's going to bring them up to the windward mark as fast as possible. So this first strategy and call off the start line is so important for these boats.
It's not quite the same as what we saw the other day. It's not quite the same direction, but we did see the power of the left from a similar direction the other day, and Stevie Morrison referred to it as the lucky left, and it wasn't winning every time, but I think I'd want to hold my lane out of the start on starboard and see how that took me out towards the left-hand ley line.
I think both of those are strategies that go together. I like Hannah's. It's shifty. It's actually much shiftier today, really, than the whole rest of the week. We've seen huge swings in variation here, whereas we've seen sort of 10-degree shifts earlier. So the ability to hold your lane on starboard, to be able to then tack on the shifts, and yet the point, Hannah, that the NACRAs maybe can't tack on as many shifts or as often as, say, a 470 or a laser would. So really making sure to pick the right one, to be eyes out of the boat. And I think in some ways that's where we can maybe see the teams with a bit more experience come to the fore, the teams that don't have to be so heads in the game, so heads in the boat, and can be heads in the game instead. And especially with, you can even just see now in front of us a bit of a lull and a bit of a puff with transitional sailing all the time. You really have to be heads out to make those decisions, to keep making those decisions.
Yeah, you do, absolutely. And I think this is where splitting the roles between helm and crew are really important. So if you can offload one person so that they can get their heads out the boat and allow the other person to really take control of the sailing of the boat and the boat speed, then you're sort of dividing and conquering. You're making sure that you're sailing fast and you're making good decisions. And the experience is where that comes into its own. The more experienced teams will know their strategy for that and how to execute that.
Any surprise at all to see the U flag being flown for just a 10-boat fleet?
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised. Often in meta races we have what's called the P flag, the preparatory flag, which means even if you're over in the last minute, you can dip back and restart. Or if you're over at the gun, you can dip back and restart. The U flag means if you're over in the last minute or you're over at the start, you get a disqualification from the race. So a really heavy punishment. So we might see this fleet just hanging back a little bit just to make sure that they are not U flagged, but it could be a conscious decision from the race committee because we've had such a delay and they're keen to get this race and the 49er race in.
I'm impressed at the moment with the confidence of GBR 21, of John Gibson and Anna Burnett. Last time we saw them have to bail out at about 30 seconds. They wanted the pin. They weren't able to execute it. With 15 seconds to go here, they will have space and distance to the pin. 10 seconds to go. And that's Britain sitting in third, wanting the pin, wanting to go to the left-hand side. Hopefully we'll see them accelerate well off the line here, but it maybe looks like all of the fleet being a bit conservative there. That was definitely an all-clear start. Middle of the line, punched just a touch. The New Zealanders, the Spanish, and the Italians. GBR 21, though, a good start there for Gibson Burnett.
Yeah, I mean, what they've done there is they've given themselves options to sail their own VMG. I think it was maybe... it doesn't look that starboard end bias, actually. I think it's a pretty square line, so a great start off the pin for John and Anna, but we know this race course is going to be shorter than what we've seen previously, so those ley lines do approach pretty quickly, and being the furthest left boat, you can run out of options sometimes if you don't get that left shift that enables you to sort of get your lane back across the fleet, back towards the mark.
And the Italians, Italy 26, are overall leaders, being forced to tack away onto the right-hand side. They just weren't able to hold their lane coming out at the start, so they're already onto plan B, following the Kiwis, who did a port tack start out to the far right, out towards the harbour walls. So the Italians forced to chance their arm on the right-hand side of the course and see what they can get on that side. But very good still from GBR 21 on the left of picture, and the Spanish above them looking comfortable, and the Argentinians just about managing to hold their lane, but in danger of being affected by the Spanish.
Yeah, and a really good start. I think that's GBR Ben Saxton just up to the right of our frame, coming out on starboard as well. A lovely start near the starboard end, holding his lane, like you said, Andy, out to the left hand. And I like his position because he has got control. He has got that choice of when he tacks. If the fleet below him there, out on the left, decide to tack and come back across, he chooses. Does he go before them or does he go beyond them and sort of get more leverage out to the left? So a really lovely positional movement, choice of position there from Ben Saxton.
I really like the way the Brits are sailing here. They're sailing high, and yet they're managing to lift the windward float as well. And I think they're managing to creep up towards the Spanish, who are now lifting their windward float as well. But for a while, it was only the Brits on this side that had their windward float in the air. But now it's the Spanish that have managed to get their boat to lean over. Now the Brits matching them, and once these two boats are doing this, you can see them stretching away on the Argentinians and the other Italian boat behind them. So I think these two boats doing very well on this side of the course right now.
They've certainly got a little bit more pressure than the Argentinians and Italians inside them, because as you said, you can see their windward hull just lifting a little bit more, which generates more height. As soon as you get more pressure on the foils, you can sail the boat a lot higher. So big gains to be made for these boats, finding those patches of more pressure. But I still think Ben Saxton's in a great spot there in the middle of the course. He's got great control over those boats. Just behind him, the Italians and Argentinians aren't much of a threat right now. The biggest threat to him are these two boats, the GBR 21 John Gimpson, Anna Burnett, and the Spanish boat here. But again, he's still got that choice. When does he tack if they tack? We can't really see the boats on the right now, but I'd sort of assume the fact the Italian 26, our current leaders, got spat out of the start. Certainly if they come back towards the top mark in a good position, we'll know that right hand has been really strong, because they were certainly a good couple of boat lengths behind this pack.
I think you called that really well, Hannah. When we had that other sea level shot, you could really get the sense of just how well Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface are doing on the far side of picture. And there we see that shot again, and that shows the strength of the Brits on the left hand side with that controlling position. The Brits on the right hand side of picture really having to wait their turn as they get out towards this left hand ley line, and they will at least have to wait for the Spanish to tack before John Gimpson and Anna Burnett can tack.
Yeah, and they look high on starboard right now. They look like their angle has really closed up towards that windward mark. So for Ben, this is great. You know, he just has to hang on in here. He's got complete control. And just wait, hopefully, for a little bit of a left shift maybe, but I don't even know if he needs that to cross those right-hand boats. So a really commanding position right now.
So we can see the two Italian teams just behind Ben's sails and GBR 91's sails at the moment. There's an Italian team on starboard coming with him, and an Italian team on port tacking underneath. Do you think their eye is on the other GBR boat, Gimpson Burnett? Do you think that they are thinking, we can do whatever we can to win with the Italians well behind us, but we want to keep our compatriots back?
Absolutely. I think Ben and Nicky will be well aware now that the whole fleet, except for John and Anna, have tacked onto port. And maybe there's not too far to the ley line, so maybe they're happy just to push on and make sure they don't give away any leverage on that left-hand side to John and Anna. But ultimately, they're now giving away control of the rest of the fleet by not going with them. So this is a conscious decision for sure to stay with this third-place boat, John Gimpson and Anna Burnett. But maybe it's a tactical decision. Perhaps there is more wind out there. They've certainly been extending on that right-hand fleet from what we could see.
Here we go with the Eagle Eye, GBR 91 and GBR 21 headed out to this left-hand side. As we said, New Zealand looking like they've done okay coming out of the right there.
Yes, it does. So I thought it was the compromise move going out that way, but they started wanting to do that. So that was their starting strategy, to go out to the right. So maybe they're going to be rewarded for that after all. Whereas Italy 26, they were bounced out to the right and really not doing that well.
I think that's a tack there from John Gimpson and Anna Burnett, our furthest left-hand boat. So, and I think it looks like on the tracker that we got in front of us that Ben Saxton has match tacked them, yet we can see they're now just below them, leading back towards the middle of the course. So a nice move by both the Brits. I think we've potentially got a bit of a left shift. They've got great pressure. Again, we can see that windward hull just lifting out of the water. So they've got options now. There's a bit more pressure, and so actually they can put the bow down and sail a bit faster. You know, they've got leverage on the rest of the fleet, which is always a concern when you're sailboat racing, is knowing people have leverage to one side of you. So the decision to put the bow down is one they might be considering.
Now the points are very close, as we said, for the top six, but very, very close indeed for these two British boats. It's going to be who beats who in this medal race. So it's who beats who, at least between the two of them, and it might then be for whoever wins overall if the Italians 26 stay deep. So keeping that in mind, if you're Ben and Nicola, you're just constantly eyes on somewhat the other British team.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they've sailed a fantastic beat here, chosen a brilliant moment to come back across the course to defend this right-hand fleet, and it's all about the decision of when you do that. You know, there's no point for them in looking across going the right are gaining, we're not in great wind. They've waited for a puff to do that, and so they've come back really, really nicely, and the same for John and Anna, who I think are going to be in second, potentially just behind Ben and Nikki, but as you say, it's a who beats who for these two British boats, so they've both come at this race really attacking, and it's going to be an exciting one to see.
It seems like they got better breeze up here on this ley line compared with the boats further down to leeward. For example, New Zealand 22.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're seeing on this tracker, Italy 26, our current fleet leaders, really struggling here on the right-hand side. We've got them in 10th right now, which could maybe drop them out of the medals altogether. We'll have to keep a close eye on them as this race progresses.
Well, we've covered the two British teams. Another threat to the medal position is the Danish team. So looking here for Denmark, not quite seeing them in fact, but we see them in 7th or in 6th position overall on the tracker. So 4 places for Denmark versus the Italians, I don't think would quite put them into the medals, but we will keep an eye on that because it is going to be very long race, very shifty race in terms of the positioning at the moment. And I think probably the Italians, we could expect to be able to just chip away out of that 10th spot and up through the fleet as the race goes on. Meanwhile, tacking around the top mark here, there is a short offset leg for the NACRAs, but that is Ben Saxton and Nicola. And yesterday they had a 2-1-2, and they are following that up with winning the medal race at the moment. And such a well-deserved race here at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly confident with their speed in these conditions. They chose potentially the more conservative start, starting at the starboard end, knowing they could hold their lane because they have got that boat speed, and they've just sailed a really, really safe, controlling beat, really, on the rest of the fleet.
So New Zealand 22 just sneaking in front of the second British team. So Gemma Jones and Jason Saunders doing well out of that right-hand side. They were the first boat out to the right and on purpose. And I think then the second Brits coming in from the left here. That's GBR 91 winning and sailing away with it, the red kite. But behind them here, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, all very tight. And the Kiwis coming out of the right-hand side maybe means it'll go okay for the Italians later on down the pack. 4th position there, the Spaniards. They're just out of medal contention. They're 8th overall. The Kiwis were just out of medal contention as well, sitting 7th. So still to come, the Danish. And I think that might just be them rounding here in 5th position. So the Danes still might be able to sneak into the medals if the Italians have a really awful race.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting here is how spread out this fleet are already. Only with one upwind leg, we've got a huge spread, which is going to make it hard for the Italians, for sure, to get back into this race and to get the points back on both the British teams now, who are 1 and 3 right now. With the points so tight and the fleet so spread out, there's got to be maybe a little bit of panic starting to creep into that Italian boat.
And I can't believe how different their experience up this beat has been compared with the New Zealanders. The New Zealanders started on port tack, they went out to the right. The Italians got bounced out to the right, so that was an extra tack they had to do right there, but they've underlaid this ley line so that we can't see them in shot at the moment. We're going to see them come in from the right hand side of picture soon, but they're so far behind the rest of the fleet. It's really painful for Italy 26.
Yeah, I mean, it's an awful feeling, isn't it, when you've got your strategy wrong, or you've not executed the strategy you wanted to, and have followed that up with a couple of maybe under pressure wrong decisions. But right now they're right out of this race, and the race for the gold medal is happening at the front of the fleet with the 2 British boats, GBR 91 and GBR 21. In a who beats who scenario, but right now it looks like Ben Saxton is sort of sailing away a little bit from the rest of the fleet. He's got quite a good lead, but looks a bit on the tracker. So for him, looking forward, it's about the defensive move. It's about keeping that other British boat, the Danish boat, and I think the Argentinian boat, who are all quite a long way back now, but he has to be keeping an eye on all 3 of those boats, who are his closest threat.
I think the hard part at the moment for the Italians, if they are this deep in 10th, I was saying they might be able to chip away, but realistically, this is a big chip that they need to chip away. And sitting in 10th with the Danes in 5th would drop them out of the medals. So I think we need to keep eyes on the Danes, whether they can stay 5th or better throughout the race, and whether the Italians stay 10th, or again, there's no worse than 10th, but stay in 10th. That's how the positions would hold. The Italians, who've shown almost no chinks, started to show chinks in their armor yesterday, and very much are showing that today.
Yeah, it increasingly looks like they need the foiling conditions, the stronger winds to really guarantee their level of dominance that we saw earlier on in the week. And even that is under question from John Gimpson and Anna Burnett, who are also looking strong. I think Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface still work to do in the stronger winds to match the very best in the world. But in these light winds, as they proved yesterday, with 3 scores in the top 2, they were very comfortable in the light winds and looking very comfortable in these softer breezes today.
I think what's exciting about what we just saw a minute ago on the video footage was that they are up and foiling downwind. So for the NACRA fleet, that means there's big gains and losses to be had. If you can find that patch of wind and get foiling, your boat speed is going to be so much faster than the boats that haven't found that patch of pressure and aren't foiling. So, you know, they are spread out, but there could still be some big snakes and ladders left on this race.
It is impressive. It doesn't take much for these boats to foil downwind, does it?
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think we've maybe got 6-7 knots max out there, and they're up and absolutely ripping downwind. So it's really amazing to see.
And you can see, though, the angle, the difference, GBR 91, how high they have to come out of that jibe to try to possibly get foiling again. I mean, that doesn't actually look like a good angle towards the bottom marks in any way. So maybe Ben and Nicola being conservative there and putting a defensive jibe in?
It could well be. I think suddenly manoeuvres downwind are so costly because they have to come so high out the jibe and they have to come off the foils to complete the jibe that they lose tens of boat lengths doing it. And so you have to be so confident when you do a manoeuvre that it's the right one. Again, it's going to allow for some big place changes and some big distance changes in this race.
And for them, it's eyes behind, not only on the British, but also the Italians. It's who beats who with the British, and it's 4 points for the Brits to the Italians. So for Ben and Nicola, with the Italian 26 team sitting in 10th, they're comfortable, but you'd still think they probably have an eye on them just to make sure.
I don't know. I think right now they're almost irrelevant because Ben just needs to go and win this race, and that's all he can do. If he wins the race, he's executed everything under his control, and the rest is almost up to the Italians to throw away.
Well, he's given away a lot of distance to the New Zealanders, so holding on to that lead suddenly looks a lot more difficult for the Brits in the front. So that could make things interesting, and maybe they don't have the full choice of both marks like I thought they were going to have when they got to the bottom of this course. Maybe they are being dictated to partly by the New Zealanders.
It could be. I mean, we can't quite see here, but it could have been that Ben just chose to give away a bit of distance just to make sure that he was lined up to go around the same mark as the New Zealand boat, to be defensive rather than to line himself up for the split round the other mark. So giving away distance but keeping control of the boats behind you, potentially a good move, but we're going to have to wait and see how it pans out for him.
Looks like they're both going for the right-hand mark, taking them towards the right-hand side of the course, maybe avoiding the worst of the downwind bad air from the other boats.
Yeah, definitely. You know, he's in the controlling position now, having rounded that mark right in front of the New Zealand boat. He's going to be holding high to sort of put the New Zealand boat into bad air from him. He's really sort of gained control back of this race, I'd say, having maybe looked a little bit shaky down the bottom part of that run.
And quite a gap back to the others, so maybe he can focus on New Zealand to some extent. I wonder, on New Zealand, they did very well on this side of the course previous time round, so maybe going right isn't such a bad thing. I just wonder how long they're going to keep on going out in this direction.
Yeah, we can't really tell from here, but I'm sure Ben or Nicola will be looking and trying to match tack the New Zealand boat. So as soon as they see them go for attack, I'm sure we'll see the British boat try and match them. And that's just a defensive move. That's purely not allowing that New Zealand boat to get any sort of separation from them because they are so far extended from the rest of the fleet right now. So we'll be looking out for that shortly.
Looks like the Austrian boat's dropped off the foils, so it's not consistent foiling, and so that if they're right on the cusp of are they foiling, aren't they? Like you were saying earlier, the gains for the opportunity for big gains, big losses is really out there on the downwind legs.
I think the whole fleet has decided that this right-hand side is the place to be. I'm looking on the tracker, and again, you guys can get to the tracker yourselves as well from our website, but looking on the tracker, every single boat behind the first and second has also made that left-hand turn and gone out to the right-hand side. And I think as the leaders and as the Kiwis, you are happy to see that. You are more confident to go, all right, well, everyone's come with us. Now there's one boat tacking away. That's Denmark tacking away, but realistically, you've just got that tiny bit more confidence in your decision making with the rest of the fleet coming with you, and whether that was the mark being so much in the favor or the right side being so strong, somewhere in here we should start to see them protect against GBR 21 and against the Danes tacking. But yeah, it looks like the right side, everyone's happy to be there.
Absolutely. I think what we can see on the tracker is how high they are on port. You know, it's clearly been a bit of a left shift. So they've all taken the mark that gets them onto port straight away, gets them onto the long tack. We've just started to see quite a few of the boats tack now onto starboard. And I think, I can't quite see on the tracker, but I think we can see the New Zealand boat has made the tack. We can't quite see what's happening to Ben Saxon. He appears to have stopped on our tracker, but I'm sure that's just a malfunction rather than what's actually happening on the racecourse.
The other thing to notice is that neither of the Italian boats are doing very well, but actually Italy 26, that was way last, has actually taken a couple of places, and it's actually another Italian boat, Italy 5, that finds itself at the back.
Yeah, so for Italy 26, that's a big move, because for them to stay on the podium, if they stayed in 10th and the Danish boat stayed 5th or higher, they were going to lose any podium spots. So any boats they can overtake right now is a really big deal.
Yeah, I think exactly that. The 10th to 9th with the Danish sitting and still in 5th is a huge one. So for the Danes, I'm sure they do know the math, but they need to start chipping away. They need to get themselves into 4th if the Italians have moved up to 9th, or even better than 4th. And of course the Italians will just keep the chipping throughout the fleet. So keeping an eyes on that on the back of the pack. Meanwhile, this is the front of the pack. GBR 21, you can see the harbour wall behind them, still defending against New Zealand 22. They kind of are doing fine here in terms of protecting their gold medal. They can keep the Kiwis behind them, the other Brits behind them, the Italians behind them, and they should be able to take it home.
Exactly, you know, they're doing everything they need to do. As we said, it's a lovely feeling rounding that leeward mark, heading out to the right, and the whole fleet following you, because you have complete control, and they've done what we said they probably would do, is they've tacked when the New Zealand boat have tacked, so they've not given away any leverage to the other side of the course, and they're just in complete control, and right now it's about sailing the boat fast, trying to pull out as much distance as possible, because we've seen how tricky these downwinds can be for this NACRA class, and how much distance you can gain or lose very, very quickly. So I'm sure they'll just be looking to pull out as much distance as possible on the chasing pack.
It is definitely much lighter, as Andy was referring to earlier. We had the hulls flying and both crews out on the wire. Now we've got at least the crew bow forward out on that windward hull, kind of the positioning we saw yesterday. And this was where the Brits really shined yesterday. This is where they were able to score a 2-1-2. So maybe not only their fleet management and their course management here in Weymouth, where I'm sure they've trained a lot, but perhaps just a tiny bit of an extra speed advantage as well.
I'm sure they'll be very comfortable in these wind conditions. The only slight question mark is different gusts down the next run, and will that offer opportunities for some behind them to pop up onto the foils if perhaps they're still in low riding displacement mode. But in terms of going upwind, I think tactically and in speed terms they look very safe right now.
I think interestingly in the battle for bronze, we've got the Danish boat there on the middle of our screen, who have got a little bit of separation from a couple of the boats who are ahead of them, John Gimpson, Anna Burnett, and I think Spain 28, Tara Pacheco and Florian Trittel. So potentially giving themselves some options to overtake a couple of boats up this next upwind leg, which would really mix the podium up a little bit.
Yeah, it looks at the moment on the tracker like they have been able to move into 4th position, with the Italians having moved up into 9th. That chip away to 4th lets the Danes back on the podium, and I think that's it's tricky. You've seen them just tack here. It's definitely not a sure thing that they will stay ahead of the Spanish. The Spanish out to the right are in the spot where the Kiwis did well last time. So we're just eyes on all the time, and it's getting lighter and lighter out there, as you can see. Hull's really flying flat, but still very much raceable. These boats going a lot quicker than you would expect in how flat the water looks at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, this NACRA 17 boat really does move, even in this very light stuff. They're still trickling along at a pretty fair pace, but nothing like what we've seen at the start of the week when they were absolutely flying around Weymouth Bay and Weymouth Harbour.
No, and not even by comparison with the way they came off the start line just 10 or 15 minutes ago. The breeze really has dropped out, and now the question is, as they hoist the Jenica and get going downwind, do they have enough power to be able to pop the hulls and get up into foiling mode, at which point they will launch into hyperspace and be extremely difficult for anybody else to catch on this run.
It looks a long way from hyperspace right now, doesn't it? But I think we've had a change of course. I think the race committee have shortened the course because that wind has dropped so much. We can see the red or pink mark with the orange stripe round it indicating that. So a short downwind leg to the finish, which is maybe a sigh of relief for the British team. Less distance to have to defend, particularly if the wind starts to build behind, like we have seen sometimes in this lighter air, giving those boats behind an opportunity to get back into the race and attack the lead pack.
And the Brits have pulled away quite nicely from the New Zealanders, always in the controlling position. So whilst the Kiwis managed to catch up with the Brits by the bottom of the previous run, they've got a lot of catching up to do if they're going to get back to the race leaders right now.
I think that's a huge stretch there for GBR. They've really well played that upwind. As we said, they set it up from the bottom mark, having the Kiwis behind them and in their bad air, and the right side so favored that they had to follow behind and in their bad air. And now they've had the ability to reap the advantage from it, the 10 to 15 boat lengths that they've gained as a lead coming out of it. Meanwhile, the Kiwis behind them rounding, and the second British team rounding into third. But that's now for Ben and Nicola. It's only so far to the finish line. They've almost got to have an awareness that the gold medal here, the European Championship, and the title here are all within their grasp. And really, what can they do between now and the finish, Anna?
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're sort of moments away from sealing that victory, and to be honest, they won't really be looking at the New Zealand boat because they are absolutely not a threat, whether they overtake them or not, to that gold medal. So they'll be all eyes on GBR 21. Sorry, John Ginson and Anna Burnett, currently in third place in the race and overall, and it is a who beats who on them. So I'm sure we'll just see them match every move the other British boat make.
And yet it is just light enough that it doesn't really feel like a solid. You never necessarily feel solid until you're crossing the line, but in these sorts of conditions where there could just be a puff and breeze brought down from upwind of you, you don't really feel confident until you've crossed the line, correct?
Absolutely correct. You know, particularly in these boats, I think the speed differences are so great between a knot or two more of pressure that, yeah, it's never over till it's over, as the saying goes. So, yeah, they won't be feeling comfortable or confident, I'm sure, until they've crossed the line and got the beat for the race to be over.
Behind them then a really close battle, but now it's been lost for the fourth and fifth place. So the Danish dropping back again, the Spanish gaining on that right hand side to put the Danes back into the fifth position. And I think the Danes probably know the math the same that we do, that if they're in fifth with the Italians in ninth, that means they're off the podium. If they can squeeze out a boat on this downwind and get back into fourth with the Italians staying ninth, they'll be back onto the podium. So just keeping an eye on Denmark 71 there. And again, realistically, it's very close with them in Spain. And if they're able to use what looked like there a little bit of lured advantage, they just soaked harder on that set. They might then be able to jibe onto the Spanish. They might be able to still play it out behind the Brits here who are leading on the downwind.
Yeah, it's quite possible. I mean, this is great for these British that we're looking at now to be able to look back at the melee behind them, because anytime you've got a fight going on behind you, you know that you're just going to stretch your advantage in the lead even further. So whilst it's a slow road to victory down this run at the moment, the time is running out for anyone else to be able to attack them. And just look at the gap back to the Italians still going upwind. I reckon the winners will have crossed the finish line perhaps even before that Italian boat gets to the top mark.
Yeah, and we've got such a good battle a little bit further back for that third place overall, with the Danish needing to overtake the Spanish boat to get themselves on the podium. They're hot on their heels. We've got the tracker up right now. You can't quite see it, but yeah, we're going to be following that one closely and checking in on whether Italy 26, Tito and Banti, have managed to overtake any more boats to get themselves back in contention for that third spot.
So here's where we can see the battle, and it's actually really interesting that the Danish just decided to jibe before the Spanish. I thought they'd done a good job of soaking down on the line of the Spanish, of being in a position to jump and to attack when the Spanish jibed. But meanwhile, instead what we have is a split. We have Denmark deciding perhaps that the right-hand side of the course has been so favored in the last upwind and even in the last downwind that maybe they'd rather just split from Spain and hope later on that they get a little extra breeze and are able to crawl over the top of Spain. And that's the orange and the purple on the top left of the screen that we're keeping an eye on constantly, because Italy 26 is still up in ninth, and that would mean the medal changing if Denmark moves into fourth position.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I mean, we can't see how close it is on the water, but I was surprised to see the Danish boat flip the jibe in before the Spanish boat, because you know, they were in that controlling position. They're now on a really long jibe to the finish. So if they had managed to just jibe right on the Spanish boat's air in this light winds, they'd have had so much control going down this really long jibe to the finish. But we can't see what's happening out there, and I'm sure they had a great reason to jibe slightly earlier. So we'll have to see how it plays out for them, whether they can get past the Spanish boat and get into the bronze medal position.
The leaders with the red Jenica going past one of the leeward marks, but they need to go a little bit further, but not too much further, to get down to that finish line. And it is a pretty significant margin of lead that Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface have right now.
I think we said you're never feeling comfortable, but somewhere in here they're going to start feeling comfortable sailing down towards the finish line. A huge gap behind them, a huge gap to second, then third, and then the Italians who had been sitting at the top of the leaderboard. Here is the jibe for the Brits, Ben and Nicola. Not a huge roll. I would have expected a bit more maybe of a roll jibe. Instead, it's just try to slide it through and maybe perhaps don't disrupt the airflow on the sails too much. So instead, they've just flicked the battens coming on, and I think that's the final jibe to the finish line there, Hannah. They should be in and across and then winning this European Championship.
Yeah, exactly. I think they might just start to relax a little bit now. They've got that final jibe in, and they've got such a commanding lead over the next chasing pack. But yeah, they're coming across the line now, and I can only imagine the relief and excitement and happiness those guys will be feeling about how they've finished this championships off.
And there they are, taking the gun, taking the win of the medal race, and ultimately winning the regatta. Ben Saxton and Nicola Boniface doing so well throughout the end of this week. The tail end, the pointy end, when it got really, really important. Yesterday they were able to perform with a 2-1-2, and on the day in the medal race, they've made their country proud.
Yeah, I mean, they're clearly a pretty dominant performer in this light wind conditions. And they've executed a fantastic race strategy and really controlled this race from almost start to finish. So they'll take a lot of confidence from this going forward into this summer's events.
And Nicky Boniface, she injured herself while training just before the World Cup in Enoshima last year, and had to take quite a few months out of the boat. So they had a disrupted off-season, and she had the decision to make about whether to go for surgery or whether to sort of muscle it out. But she went for the surgery, and they seem to be coming back very strong, even though they had to sit out for those few months over the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. They've come back really, really strong and have been sort of building on their performance since coming back just after Christmas. And I think we're now going to have the New Zealand team, Gemma Jones and Jason Saunders, coming through to take second place, just ahead of John Gimpson and Anna Burnett, who have done enough to seal, I think, the silver medal. So a phenomenal medal race for them to move up from third to second. I know they'll have wanted to take the win or to beat their British teammates and rivals, Ben Saxton and Nicola Boniface, but a great result for those guys too.
You can see them here just celebrating their win. This is Ben Saxton and Nicola, and a well-deserved victory, a well-deserved regatta here, and we said there's a lot on the line for themselves against their teammates, against the guys who've just crossed through in third position here, the second British team. But meanwhile, the second British team crossing third allows them to move into silver position overall. So I think they will be disappointed, but they should still be proud of themselves.
Exactly, it's still a fantastic result for both those teams. I think they'll both be mixed emotions for John and Anna for sure, but they should be really happy with a silver medal. And yeah, you can see all smiles on board. That NACRA team, Ben and Nikki, giving us a wave. Hi guys. Great to see how ecstatic they are with that win and a European title for those guys.
Now it looks like the Danish are coming in to this finish line in fourth place. So regardless, they have done enough to get into the medals. They are basically, hopefully, doing everything they can, and now it's behind them whether the Italians can move through the fleet. So the Danes, that was really realistically all that they could do, was cross and get in front of the Spanish on that downwind. They did it by splitting. They split out to the right-hand side where there was more breeze. They've done what we thought they needed in terms of just chip away, get to fourth. The top three were too far away, and now it's all on all of our eagle eyes to see which one of these boats behind them is the Italians and how close they are. Meanwhile, just behind, crossing in fifth spot, the Spanish there, Tara Pacheco and Florian Tritel. Again, they were sitting in eighth coming into today, so not quite in the medal hunt, but really it's all on behind to see where the Italians are sitting. And on the tracker, we've currently got them still in ninth place. So keeping eyes out there, you guys, because that is going to be, talk about disappointment, that is going to be a run through the ringer going from first to fourth place if that ends up being that way.
It is. I think, although we've got John Gimpson and Anna Burnett, who are silver medalists at this event. Great job to those guys for a really well sailed week and a pretty well executed medal race. They certainly had a strategy to start at the pin end and go left, and they really executed that. It didn't quite play out as well as maybe they'd hoped, but a really great silver medal for this pair.
Good to see them looking happy with the silver medal. And so any disappointment that they might have, you weren't seeing it there in those shots. As the next boat's just coming across, it's the Argentinians, or no, this is the Austrians.
I think both the Austrians and the Argentinians.
Yeah, so I think that's Outridge going across second behind Thomas Zajac and Barbara Matz, very close together there. So that just leaves two Italian teams to cross the line, I think.
I think you're right. So I think that does mean that the Danish pair have done enough to secure the bronze medal, which is absolutely fantastic for them. And a huge disappointment, I'm sure, for Tita and Banti. Italy 26 went into this medal race leading, and we believe, unconfirmed, but we're pretty sure they've now going to have dropped to fourth place overall.
This is Italy 26, the team that we're discussing so heavily today, and I feel heavy-hearted watching them here. I think it's disappointing and gut-wrenching in some ways to see a team underperform what you think they might be capable of, and they have been so strong all year, and they've been so strong this week, and then they just haven't been able to put it together necessarily in the light air of yesterday and today, Andy.
No, it seems like they've got some work to do in that area. It's almost, I think, like sailing a different boat in these light winds compared with the full-on foiling conditions that we had earlier on in the week. We're seeing different pecking orders in different conditions, because we're seeing different sailors rise and fall according to where their particular strengths lie. So for the Italians, they got some work to do in the lighter winds, and conversely, I think Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface know that they've got some work to do in the stronger winds.
Well, here's the second Italian team, and they're just bringing up the rear in the NACRA medal race, and that is a tough spot for that country to see both of their teams drop out of the European medals, the medals here altogether. And I think realistically, if you're the team captain, you go home and you say, we might need to spend some time in light air. We might need to figure out what this sitting forward and leeward is all about. And maybe we've got some things to learn from the Brits.
Maybe. I'm sure they'll look at the whole week and evaluate their performance to every tiny, minute detail. But I think if we look back at the start of that race, Tita and Bantu, they didn't really give themselves much of a chance. They were on the back foot, off the line. They had to tack out early. There was not much wind. We'd said tacking or manoeuvre manoeuvres were going to be costly, and they really were. And from the off, they were really at the back of the pack, and it was always going to be an uphill struggle for those guys from there on in.
And instead, the uphill struggle was won. The mountain was climbed by the Brits. Ben Saxton and Nicola Boniface going into that in second, coming out of that in first. And the same for John Gibson and Anna Burnett going into third and coming out in second place. And I think we have to feel for the Danish as well. They had a rough week, and then they were able to just kind of, at points they were winning, they dropped to fourth. They just eked it out, just doing enough here in the medal race to get back into the podium.
Those last 2 days of light winds have really turned around the scoreboard on the NACRA, and it seems like the Brits rose to the occasion. They seem to prefer the light winds, or were particularly Ben Saxton and Nicky Boniface anyway. And the Danes look really solid on this Portland Harbour a couple of days ago in a bit more breeze in the flat water. And the Italians, the masters at the moment, along with John Gibson and Anna Burnett, of the Tokyo Light, which might be something worth bearing in mind. The big waves out in Weymouth Bay, maybe that's a good advantage to take into Tokyo, at least for Tita and Banty. And we'll have to see if Gibson and Burnett get their chance to go to Enoshima later on this year, and indeed for Tokyo 2020 next year.
Well, we'll try to finish out the rest of the scoreline for you guys, but that was the top three, and the Danish scoring another bronze medal at the European Championships, not their first bronze medal at a European, so well done to them, well done to the Brits. Unfortunate for both Italian teams to have a rough regatta here. The Argentinians, we didn't quite see across the line. I think they finished about sixth. They had been in the medal hunt, sitting in fifth this morning. I think that probably still keeps them in about fifth position overall. So that would be the top five, with just the second Italians still in sixth overall. Here you can see now the 49er men coming out for their racing. They already get one race this morning, their gold final qualifier race, which was another lighter on this race course this morning, about 11 a.m. So some of them will at least have felt familiar with that. And while we saw some shuffling through that race, we didn't actually see any different top tens go through. So realistically, first to seventh changed a lot during the race, first to sixth, but the guys who'd been top 10 and making the medals stayed top 10 and making the medals. And we will go through those scores in just a moment before they get started racing. But really quickly, Andy, you've been covering it all week. World Sailing voting about the RS Aero versus the Laser, which will be the equipment for the single-handed, and it sounds like the votes are in. And it is overwhelmingly still the Laser and the Laser Radial for the men's and the women's single-handed for Paris 2024.
Okay, so another example that we often see at meetings where the smaller the committee that makes the recommendations makes one suggestion, but it tends to revert to the status quo when you put these votes back to the council on the final day. So anyone who was a fan of the Laser, it's been a difficult 24 hours for them, but they maybe can breathe a sigh of relief that the Laser remains in, and those that wanted the RS Aero to come in and replace it will be disappointed. But as I said yesterday, maybe your average weekend RS Aero sailor won't feel so bad after all, because they don't see their boat thrown into the fray of being an Olympic class and all the politics and disruption that can cause.
It does change a class sometimes, doesn't it, putting it into the Olympic fray?
I think the Laser has been a fantastic class for the Olympic Games, and that's what we're focusing on, doing what we're doing. But I think it has caused disruption to what was already a very well-established weekend races fleet. And I don't think that difference, trying to manage those two different types of customers, been managed terribly well. Maybe RS would have had a better answer than that, but I think we've yet to see that problem addressed well by any particular class yet. I think once you become an Olympic class, it's very difficult to sustain momentum as a weekend warriors class as well.
All right, well, these are the 49er men's scores heading into the medal race. Peter Burling and Blair Tuke, the Kiwis, still on top, but only by 9 points over Dylan Fletcher and Stuart Bithell, who won the race this morning, to put them still in the fight. Just behind them, James Peters and Finn Sterrett, the second British team, also with a good race this morning, a fifth, putting them still in the fight, at least for the silver position. And then the hard race this morning, the 17th for Diego and Iago, the Spaniards, dropping them out of the medals at that moment. but still very much in the fight for at least third place, if not second. And I think the other two switch-ups we saw this morning was the Germans switching positions. It had been Eustace and Max going into the day in sixth, and they dropped to their teammates Eric Heil and Thomas Plossel with the 16th versus the 10 there. So we'll see a little inter-country battle between those two, because they're both a bit too far behind to get top four. But realistically, points are close here, especially second to fourth. But even still, Pete and Blair could have a bad one.
Absolutely. I think 9 points is a nice lead for sure. It's probably not what they're used to. They're used to often going into these medal races with a commanding lead that almost can't be overturned. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they approach this with only Dylan Fletcher and Stuart Bithell able to knock them off that top spot, whether they take the race entirely to the Brits. I think it is so light out there. We've just seen with the NACRAs how tricky it is to get around this race course. So controlling people and match racing people is, you'll know about this, Jenny, is maybe harder when it's that light. I'm not sure.
It definitely is harder, I think, in many ways when it's that light. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether Pete and Blair decide to go for the match race altogether. I kind of hope that they do. I think it's really fun when we get to watch the match racing during the medal race, because as we said earlier, there's then other boats around, and for Dylan and Stuart, it really does matter that there are other boats around, and they'd love to not be involved in a match race, because they could easily drop out of second and even third if they're taken out of the race by Pete and Blair. And yet in the 49er, it's a bit more difficult, I think, in light air to really have control of someone. The good part about it is it's a boat with two sails, so sometimes seeing a match race with a laser is very different than seeing a match race where there's a jib and a main, and you can actually really control the boat well, still sailing forward with the main but ragging jibs, etc. So we're going to keep eyes on whether that goes on, or whether Pete and Blair maybe mess with them a tiny bit and then let them go. Maybe they want to sail their own race, but I think 9 points isn't quite enough to feel comfortable sailing your own race, at least from the get-go.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is you don't often get these kind of scenarios to practice for this, and maybe it's a scenario they want to practice before Tokyo 2020 in case they find themselves in a similar situation on the final day of the Olympic regatta next year.
Absolutely. I think the wind looks really light right now, and whilst a lot of viewers might think Pete and Blair potentially don't want to race to make sure they don't lose that gold medal position, I can sort of imagine that they do want to race for that very reason, because you just don't get to practice these high pressure, high tariff situations all too often. So whether it goes right or wrong for them, they'll still learn so much from actually having to execute this race. I think it even looks maybe too light to get a race off right now. It doesn't look like we've got the orange flag up on the committee boat or the pin end, so it looks like the 49er men's fleet will be waiting a little bit out there to get their race underway.
So there's also some news coming out of London at the mid-year meeting with World Sailing today that the RSX is going to trials against the recommendation of the board to retain the RSX. So Dorian van Rieselberg, the reigning Olympic champion, wrote a very impassioned letter, bearing in mind the fact that no one has been more successful on the existing Olympic equipment for the windsurfer. He's won 2 Olympic gold medals on it, but he hasn't exactly given it a ringing endorsement in this letter that he made. So when you've got that kind of statement being made, maybe the board felt that they couldn't ignore what Dorian was saying, representing the feelings of many other people in the windsurfing. So Dorian and many other windsurfers will be relieved to hear that the RSX isn't just getting another clear run through to be the windsurfing equipment, that it's going to have to go up against some of the other options.
And what was he saying in the letter? What was the impassioned letter suggesting?
Well, there were a lot of points in there. So it would, in fact, let's get Ben Ramoka in, because he knows this world better than I do. So class manager for the 3 classes we're watching here. Ben, what would you say were the main points out of Dorian van Rieselberg's letter?
Well, he talked a little bit about the culture within windsurfing. Part of that has been to keep the technology up to date. In fact, the RSX is already the longest serving windsurfer there's ever been. They've had two other board changes already in the history of windsurfing. 3 other board changes in the history of windsurfing, and at 4 quadrennials in a row, the RSX is the longest serving piece of equipment in windsurfing at the Olympics. And then he went on to state that at the time of selection, the RSX was actually a compromise. It was partway between the old long boards with center boards and the new style formula boards. So that's why the RSX has the kick-up dagger board and that's used in light wind for all the pumping racing, and then they put it up in the windier racing and sail off the fin. He also went on to talk about some of the quality issues that they've had in recent years with the fins, and then the final point he raised that caught me was he talked about how difficult it is for youth windsurfers to transition from the sport they're having fun with to a sport where you have to be an absolute physical specimen to even get to the top levels, and how long that takes. So a champion at 19 in the very successful big techno class, for example, has to got through maybe 4, 6, or longer years to get the strength necessary to compete in RSX, and that's a daunting task for windsurfers who grow up just wanting to sail and sail their boards at the younger levels. So I know he's in favor of a foiling solution, one that doesn't need a centerboard to keep going, and one where you just don't race in under 6 knots. You go out when it's 6 knots and you get up on the plane, and then they basically go at super high speeds all the time. That's his preferred solution, and we'll see after trials whether that remains World Sailing solution.
And do we have an idea of what that trials will entail?
We've got our top lieutenant in the background here listening in, but I'm sure they wouldn't have set the dates for such a thing yet. I would imagine, like we saw in the single-handed trials, you could imagine a trials in September, let's say, with a report following in October, and then finally a decision in November. But that might be optimistic. Maybe they need more time to get through something like that. But certainly the decision won't come before November.
So the classes that you manage, they've already been secured previously, so they're not really been up for discussion, which is why you can sit here with us, correct, Ben? So you're not really had to be involved in the politics, because the 49er, the 49erFX and the NACRA already through to 2024. The equipment voted in now, as I understand it, is for laser men and laser radial women. That would be the same for the single-hander, 470 mixed. Hannah gave her ringing endorsement to that idea of men and women racing together in the 470 earlier today, and the mixed IKA formula kite surfing. And there was an experiment to trial the relay between the men and the women, which apparently went down very well at Lake Garda just a week or so ago at the World Championship. So that's kite surfing. What about offshore? Where are we up to with that?
The offshore discussion is happening as we speak. The proposal from the board is to make a long list, they're calling it, of boats that they would say are ready for Paris 2024, and then only select one of those in November of 2023. I did hear in the equipment committee meetings yesterday that there was a proposal to not have a long list, but instead have a set of criteria by which then the regions can set which boat they want to use themselves, rather than have to pick from that list, which was, I would assume, hastily put together and doesn't include any newer specialist boats that might come to the fray now that offshore is Olympic. So there was a lot of negotiating being done on that equipment committee, and they're in discussion right now as a council. So we don't yet know what the council has decided, and we should know shortly.
So overall, the laser has stayed, but how would you rate the rate of progress in terms of the balance between making progress, making change, and keeping things as they are, for keeping costs down and keeping things more predictable as well?
Well, that's an awful lot of things to discuss in one question. There's been a departure in the 2024 slate from the 2020 slate in a number of areas. The first one being that gender equity has been achieved. The second one being a reintroduction of yet another keelboat to the Olympics, this time in the offshore discipline. So that certainly adds to the diversity of sailing in 2024, probably more so from the fact it's offshore than it's keelboat. I think, keelboat sailing is pretty much the same skill set as dinghy sailing, just bigger and more expensive. So, there's been some diversity added. Then, of course, kite surfing's come in, so that's some more diversity. But at the cost of some of the legacy classes, and some would argue at the cost of some of the fairness to all body sizes. I'm sure the Finn sailors will continue to let us all know that there's nowhere for them naturally to fit if they're quite a large man. And and that remains to be the case on the current slate.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So, meanwhile,
This is the NACRA scores as they sit after the medal race. So you can see the two Brits rose to the top, the Danish as well into the medals, and the Italians just dropping off the medals, off of the podium, just 2 points there. So very well sailed what we watched racing earlier. The Argentinians as well sitting in 5th, and the rest of the fleet not really making any major moves there. The Kiwis had stayed in 7th, the Italians in 6th, the Spanish in 8th. A really interesting race though, and I think realistically what we saw out on the race courses, they don't really quite know how to sail in light air yet. We saw different foil rakes, different differentials, different modes sailing upwind. It seemed like no one's really got a handle on the setup in the NACRA. No one's necessarily, well, maybe Ben Saxton and Nicola have got a handle on it, and they're just not quite spreading the word to the rest of the fleet.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks like it. They look very, very comfortable in these light conditions. I think Ben has, for the entire time he's been in the NACRA, sort of enjoyed the lighter wind range of conditions, potentially because it's slightly more, it's like sailing the other boats he sails all the time. I don't know, but for sure he looks like he's got a speed edge over the rest of the fleet right now in these conditions. But, this class is new this cycle with the foils, and the person who keeps learning fastest and for the longest up until Tokyo 2020 will probably be the person standing on the top step of the podium.
I think it's fair enough to say that for the 49ers as well. I mean, we saw them sitting out there right now. They're just waiting for the breeze to fill, hopefully. But it's no longer Pete and Blair's game necessarily. It's not really they're running away with it like they did with the last quad. There are now points and others that can be playing at the top of the podium.
well, we saw that last time with Nathan Outridge and Ian Jensen when they increasingly were having their attention and their careers pulled towards the America's Cup, working for Artemis from Sweden, and they really tried hard to maintain their top dog status in the 49er, but with that split attention, they weren't really able to do that, and they looked still pretty good, but they weren't invincible like they were leading into London 2012 when they were just winning everything. So the relief on their faces when those Australians won that silver medal, it meant an awful lot to them, and it was almost like they won the gold medal, but the gold medal was long gone with Pete Burling and Blair Tuke. I wonder if it's going to be a little bit more like that for Pete and Blair this time round, except I think the cause for concern for the rest of the fleet is they're not long back in the game. I mean, they've been on a 2-year holiday, winning the America's Cup.
Holiday.
What a holiday.
Going around the world.
Holiday's a tough one to say.
Nearly winning the Volvo Ocean race. I'm being slightly facetious. Quite a tough holiday. Yeah. It's one of those working holidays. So 2 years out, okay, it's other sailing experience, but the game should have moved on, and they should have found themselves struggling to get back in, a bit like Outridge and Jensen did on the previous cycle. But maybe they are another Ben Ainsley that can just, or Giles Scott, who can just take the fin, pick it up, go and win a European Championships, as he's just done in Athens just a day or so ago, and then go back to his day job working for the British team in the America's Cup. There's not many sailors that can do that, but maybe Pete and Blair are good enough they can do that. The other thing is that they're being very generous with everything they know about 49er sailing with the other New Zealanders, and they've got a really strong squad down under that's been working really hard, and in fact they didn't win their own national championships earlier on in the year. That was Logan Dunning-Beck and Oscar Gunn who actually beat the reigning Olympic champions at the the little round the Cairns national championship with probably less than 10 boats in it. So they haven't won every regatta this year. It makes me think of what we were saying earlier about Alex Maloney and Molly Meach. I'm not aware of the same depth of 49erFX sailing. I'm sure they train together with the boys, but they're not using exactly the same equipment. So that's maybe a bit tougher on them, and they have to find their overseas training partners to work with.
Yeah, interestingly, the Norwegians, we had Helen in here the other day, and they had a great day today to get onto the podium, and they had been training down in New Zealand in Auckland with the Kiwis. So I think prior to that, they said they were in Brazil or in Argentina. They've kind of played the South Hemisphere winter, summer, summer, winter, even though they're from Norway. And so we've seen them benefit from training with the Kiwis, almost to detriment of the Kiwis, because perhaps that's the medal spot that Alex and Molly would want to have, is now gone to their training partners, who, when you're at that point where you're soaking up more from the training partner than the training partner perhaps is giving you. And realistically, in the past, that was Nathan and Ian to Pete and Blair. Pete and Blair were the younger team coming up, and they trained together a lot when Nathan and Ian were so well advanced towards the gold medal in London. And then I think for them, it kind of came back to bite them a little bit. Everything that they had given off to Pete and Blair, to then have Pete and Blair not steal a gold medal from under them because they were so dominant in their performance. But they must have learned a lot of tricks from what were not old dogs, but the better guys at the time when they were training partners.
Yeah, I do wonder if there is some sort of regret, with the benefit of looking backwards for Nathan and Goobs. Maybe they needed that in order to be as dominant as they were going into the London 2012 games, when the gold and the silver were wrapped up by Australia and New Zealand before the medal race. But that was the last time, I think, that Nathan and Goobs actually beat Burling and Tuke. I think every other time after then, they were always on the back foot, and from 2013 onwards, the Kiwis were just unstoppable, and Outridge and Jensen were never able to sort of quite get their mojo back again after that. So maybe, as you say, a similar thing going on with the Norwegians going for a trip down under and learning more and taking maybe more away from it than Maloney and Meach were in having them there training with them.
Are we making you nervous, Hannah? Are there training partners in the 470 that you're giving some of your tricks to that maybe you're rethinking it at the moment?
We're really lucky in the 470. Currently it's men's and women's split, and so we've got a really strong British squad in the female and in the male 470. So we spend a lot of time training together with the men and keep it quite British focused. So we don't feel like we're giving too much to our foreign competitors, which is a really nice feeling, I guess, going into an Olympic Games. But I think Molly and Alex, or Alex and Molly, I think we're maybe drawing too many conclusions from a couple of regattas. I think a 4-year cycle is a long cycle. It's a lot of times to keep performing, and maybe they're just having a bit of a sort of mental exhaustion, maybe they just need a bit of a break and to step away and to come back, or to rethink things and rethink how to get their motivation. But it's still not a bad performance. I think where they end up fourth, it's still a very strong performance. And I think this last year leading into the Olympic Games is where the games are really made, and certainly this summer in Tokyo I think will be a really key indicator as to actually who is going to be performing next year.
Well, I guess that is going to be the question next year, isn't it? The question coming up, and hopefully the question later on this afternoon with the 49ers. We do know there's a cutoff of 6 p.m., so no racing allowed to be started here after 6, so we're exactly 1 hour to that cutoff, and at the moment, not that much breeze out there, but the 49er men ready to get their medal racing, and for them it would be the second race of the day. They sat out there for a little while earlier, so they're used to it. They had this morning where they were sent out for about an hour before the breeze filled. And we could take just a quick look at the 49er men's scores. That race went to Dylan Fletcher and Stu Bithell, and they won it pretty handily.
They did. They really executed their start strategy, win the pin, get left. They know Portland Harbour very, very well, so they'll have known the potential of that left-hand side, and they put themselves in a place to be able to do that. They did that, and we just saw them extend throughout the whole race on the rest of the fleet, which was a really dominating performance in that light, tricky stuff. The flip side was the New Zealand team, Pete and Blair. A tough first up-wind leg. We saw them around the women mark in, I think, around the 20th position. But as we've said time and time again, the calibre of their ability and them as sailors, and what you see time and time again the top sailors doing is the ability to come back through the fleet, chip away, and they caught up, I think, to 8th place by the end of the race, which, although gave a few points away to Dylan and Stu, it wasn't a disaster, and they still go into this medal race with a 9-point lead.
Yeah, there were points there where we thought they might be not leading at all into the medal race, so to be able to come back from that 20th up to 9th, I mean, it goes to show how well they sailed. I think as well for the Spaniards, we saw them 22nd, and we were hoping to see them kind of slide back through the fleet and be able to defend their second place, and we didn't see them execute the same way, Andy.
No, we didn't really get to see the detail of what the difference was between what the Kiwis managed to achieve and what the Spanish didn't. But we did see some big place changes downwind. I wonder if we see that more on asymmetric sailing than we do with symmetrical pole back kind of sailing like we might do in the 470. What do you think?
I think particularly in this lighter stuff, the 470 actually is very similar to the 49er style of saying we arc it up a lot just to get the flow over the boat and the sails and to keep momentum. So it's very similar, and certainly when we're sailing angles there is big place changes downwind, and it's almost like upwind in terms of the amount of leverage you can get on the fleet and the opportunities that open up. So for sure, I think the opportunities downwind in the 49er, the FX and the NACRA fleet are huge.
Now, you had a much briefer sabbatical than Burling and Chuk after winning the gold in Rio 2016. I should say you've had a sort of a parallel career to them, a silver then a gold, as you point at the screen and we see how glassy it looks out there. That's a little bit more like what it was first thing this morning. So playing the waiting game out there at the moment, and the flags hanging rather limp off the committee boat right now. But I was going to ask you about your brief sabbatical in the 49erFX. Was that the right thing for you to do, to take a bit of time away for the 470 and do something different?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, after Rio, my sailing partner at the time, Saskia Clark, who I did London and Rio with, was retiring, which we always knew. But we'd had such an amazing partnership and we were such good friends, and I just so much enjoyed that journey we'd had together. I really questioned actually whether I wanted to carry on, because without Sass I was a bit like, well, maybe it's time for me to do something else, and so I took a couple of months to really think long and hard about what I wanted to do. I think just jumping into something else on the screen.
I think it's an AP over A, it looks like. So while we're saying that we're not done for the day yet, they are being towed to the harbor to wait this out. So we might go into holding here, but it does not mean we're actually done yet at the moment. So looking at the glass there, Hannah, what are your thoughts about whether we could see racing in the next hour?
Yeah, I can't see the screen, but I think that might be done for the day. We'll have to get confirmation on that. Yeah, we've just got confirmation of that. So they've been sent in and we are done for the day. I mean, the flags are hardly flying, so we can't even see what they are.
The good news is we've just gotten joining us in the studio while Hannah steps out with some twisted wires. I've got Ben Saxton and Nicola just able to come in straight off the water, full wetsuits still on, you guys. In fact, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
By the way, a incredibly sailed final race today, a final day yesterday. Awesome job out in the NACRA fleet, taking the win, taking the European title, taking everything you needed to do. It was all on the line and you guys performed. How were you able to do it?
I think we just trust our training, trust each other, and just kept consistent through the week, and just each day was a new day and we just kept plugging away at it. So and it came good in the end. So.
Okay, light air, is it your specialty? Do you prefer it? Do you just feel like it went your way this week? It was definitely light yesterday and today, and you guys were on fire.
Yeah, we actually thought during the winter that we were better in strong winds. But we actually made some mistakes in the strong winds, like we capsized in the first race of Gold Fleet when we were winning, which was completely my fault.
Well done, taking that on yourself. We like it.
And then historically we've been pretty good in light winds, but yeah, we're pretty confident across the board. So yeah, that's good. And we weren't that far behind in the windy days. We were like 5th or 6th the whole time. So yeah, and then we made it count towards the end, which is when the nerves come in for other people. We just kept going, I guess. When it matters, I think, realistically. Yeah. Okay, if you say you thought you were good in the breeze, you weren't sure that you were going to perform well in the light, then why was it going so well in the light?
We went to Genoa a few weeks ago, and that was it was a long week, and we complained a bit about the lack of wind, but we definitely it helped our tuning guide, and we learned a lot there, and so we took confidence from that when we got into the light breeze after having a windy few days. We locked straight back into our light technique, and I think it helped a lot.
I like that. It helped our tuning guide. I mean, that goes to show how much this fleet is still trying to figure out what the right... We've had Hannah sitting here. The 470's been in the Olympics for a long time. Probably that tuning guide hasn't changed too much, and yet the NACRA's still very much playing with the settings, with the foiling, with the sails. How much is going on in the play?
A little bit, quite a lot of it's similar to the boat that we had last quad of the Olympics. But yeah, I mean, we're always learning little bits. So I'm sure the guys in the 470 are always learning little bits too. If the guys who were sailing it 20 years ago came back, they'd probably get a kicking.
You would hope so. I
Yeah.
don't know if you guys are watching. Who knows? Come back. We'll see. All right, this week's racing, the Italians were doing well at points. They had performance in the breeze. The Danish as well. Who were you guys keeping an eye on, or was it just sail your own race? I mean, I know there's the other British team as well, so there's always them in mind. Was it just sail your own race, or what was the trade-off between the two?
I think it was pretty much always sail our own race until there's so many races this week. You just had to keep being consistent and chipping away, and you couldn't worry about one person or one team. We just had to keep doing our best each day, and that was all we could do, really.
Okay, Ben, we particularly spoke about you liking to race in the other fleets.
Yeah.
And coming back from them, having learned something, maybe having been re-energized. Tell us why you play and dabble in other boats when you're not spending all your time in the NACRA?
I guess it comes down to loving sailing. Time off for me is racing something else. And then you do learn, like whether it's yachts or Moth or whatever. I don't sail the Moth much anymore, but they just always are thinking about different things. And if you're involved with the top end of those guys, then there's good people around and they tell you things and you tell them things. And it just keeps you sharp as well.
Well, you guys looked really sharp this week. Particularly well done yesterday and today, taking the win, taking the European Championship. An awesome job. And thanks for coming in.
Thank you
very
much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, well, we'll let you step out. We'll let the other two come in. It is
Sorry,
confirmed
we've
that
made this feet wet.
the racing has been canned out there. I mean, you saw just how glassy it was, and it was realistically not going to happen for the 49er men. Luckily, they did get to race this morning, so I don't think they're going to be...
Wetsuit.
Proper wetsuit has left a wet seat for Hannah. You won't have to sit there too long, considering there's no racing. We're pretty much done for the day. We'll just run through the medals for the 49er men. It is still Pete and Blair on top. They finished in ninth this morning, as we said. That allowed them to be at the top of the leaderboard. Dylan and Stu able to move through into second throughout the week. The first place today, letting them sit second overall, and then James and Finn moving up from fourth this morning to take that bronze medal in the European Championships. And again, two British fleets at the top, or at least in the medals. Hannah, well done here for the Brits all together for the week.
Thank you. Yeah, it was all down to me. Yeah, it's fantastic to see both Brits in both fleets really near the top of the leaderboard. I think only goes to show potentially how important this event was for the British, and it's good to see them perform under some pressure and rise to the top. I think particularly James and Finn, who are in third overall. Tough event in Palma, and to bounce back on the podium is really great to see. So yeah, well done to all the guys up there.
I think we'll just really briefly run through the NACRA results as well. That was Ben and Nicola. They crushed it in the end. They were dominant yesterday and today, and they fully deserve to take the win.
Yeah, absolutely they did. But it was great insight that you got out of them just then for them to discover just how much better they got in the light winds, and how them hating Genoa at the time, but then maybe actually being thankful to the light winds of Genoa has really helped them up their game in that. But they did what they needed to do. They got that controlling position on the start that Hannah was saying was going to be so important. They executed beautifully well. Unfortunately, the Italians didn't. They were bounced out off the start, out to the right hand side, and that right there was the difference. Small marginal differences off the start line was the difference between winning that gold medal or not.
So this was the scores for the NACRAs. John Gibson and Anna Burnett coming into the silver medal position behind Ben and Nicola, and then, as you said, the Italians dropping to fourth, the Danish doing just well enough to finish in third and hold on to that bronze medal after having been winning at points through the week. And well sailed, I think, to all the NACRA teams. It was hard out there. We saw just at the end it was getting quite light when they were racing, and a really, really good job to the top two British teams. We now could take a look at the 49erFX results that we saw earlier today. The women's gold, the first medal race that we saw was the women's FX fleet, and we kind of knew going into it who was going to take it home. The Brazilians had been pretty dominant all week.
Absolutely, they've sailed phenomenally well. We've got it up here now for you guys. Absolutely dominant all week, and the battle was really on for that silver and bronze medal. And as we spoke about a lot earlier, a fantastic performance from the Dutch team under a lot of pressure. We all knew it was their Olympic trials riding on this, and they absolutely delivered when it mattered. And of course the Norwegians who snuck up into third place in that medal race, so a great race from them too.
So that's the FX, and that's basically us then done. Unfortunately, would have loved to have seen the shootout of the 49er men, but it was not to be. Out on the race course today, you saw there was not very much wind left over there. So realistically, for the sailors, as we spoke about, the next big step, the next big test is the test event in Enoshima. That's hard to say. But for yourself, for all of them, there's varying ways of deciding how to best train, how to best practice for that. Ultimately, there was a lot on the line here for a lot of the different countries deciding who was going to the test event. And of course, as we covered earlier, there was the most on the line for the Netherlands FX team to actually qualify for their Olympic spot, and it was great to see Annemiek here and the energy that she had, and to see them take that spot. I think realistically they'd gone to an Olympics before, so it was probably a good person to have have represent their federation next year, and she was just still so excited, so it's good to see that come through. Next up, for fans of this style of racing, is the Junior Worlds, and this week we spoke a lot about last year's Junior World champions, the Swedish team, finishing 4th here. So surprisingly, they'd won the Worlds last year. They're still under 23. They had a great week, Andy.
They really did, and they discovered so much day by day. They couldn't quite believe it. And it was great for them to be so open about that and to be so honest with us as well. They were as wide-eyed at their achievements this week as we were, and it's great to see people blooming and flourishing like that, and growing so quickly from the junior scene and becoming a world-class contender, which is what I think we saw them achieve this week.
I think very much so. I think that was a team for all of us to keep their eyes on. Eyes on them will be next in the 49er Worlds is in Auckland later this year. So we said the test event for all of the fleets, for yourself, I'm sure, as well. You qualified for the test event.
Well, not officially, but we think we've done enough. So we'll hear soon, I'm sure.
Secretive British selection can't ever tell us anything, can you, Hannah? No, she's told us plenty this week, let's be honest. Okay, so then that's it, the test event, and then the 49ers and the FXs racing in the World Championships in Auckland. I think realistically, that's probably it from us here at the 2019 Volvo European Championships. I'm Jenny Tulloch. This has been Hannah Mills. Amazing to hear your insight on Weymouth, and spectacular to hear from you as well, Andy Rice. Thanks, Ben Remacher, and everyone else in this room and out on the water doing such a good, hard job for us this week to be able to follow all the racing. And of course, congratulations to all the sailors this week on very well-sailed week, and especially to the medalists. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Follow along in the next events.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen around the world, for tuning in. Thank you. These fastest of the Olympic boats. We're 10 seconds to go to the start here. Great action here. Some of the world's best sailors on board. Top performing boat. Look at that France 81, the big foil. Whoa, the boat flying out of the water.